The year is 2025, and humanity's lease on normal life has officially expired. Massive stone tombs have suddenly sprouted across the globe, looking like ancient monoliths of doom. Inside these dark structures lie relics, ancient artifacts with the power to rewrite reality itself. It is the ultimate finders keepers game, only the prize might accidentally end the world. These artifacts quickly threw society into absolute chaos. Down on the streets, armed soldiers try to contain the madness, hunting down illegal scavengers who treat these global hazards like a get-rich-quick scheme. Every myth, legend, and fairy tale we once read about is suddenly bleeding into reality, and in the middle of this mess is a lone rider, effortlessly dodging military gunfire on a motorcycle like it is a casual Sunday stroll. These legendary items are basically waiting to be claimed deep inside the tombs. Outside, the military is panicking, trying to stop the mysterious intruder before he breaches the entrance. For most people, this new era is a waking nightmare, but for one guy, it is basically a playground. With a simple hand gesture, he drops a massive pile of rubble, sealing the tomb entrance and leaving the soldiers outside to yell at a wall of solid stone. This is what happens when you climb your way to the food chain's absolute top. Brushing his hair back, our hooded intruder looks around the dark chamber, entirely unbothered by whatever trap might be waiting for him. Meet Seo Juhyun, a man who conquered so many artifacts he basically forced them to call him Majesty. With a highly confident grin, he is ready to claim whatever shiny new toy this tomb is hiding. Meanwhile, far away from the dark and dusty ruins, a giant modern skyscraper stands tall against the skyline, serving as the headquarters where the world's elite pretend they are still in charge. Inside, a massive, sterile boardroom sits empty, waiting for a high-stakes meeting that will decide the future of relic regulation. High-ranking officials are buried under a mountain of paperwork, looking incredibly stressed. The main topic of today's crisis meeting? Juhyun's complete disregard for authority and his habit of taking whatever he wants. Julian Miller is at the table, adjusting his glasses while defending their operations to a room full of grumpy suits. Next to him, Lee Seola listens quietly, well aware that their captain has zero respect for international borders. Yoo Jae-ha tries to offer a weak defense, while Ilya Volkov casually sips his coffee, suggesting their captain is simply doing some proactive scouting. That hilarious excuse makes Julian immediately choke on his drink, spitting it right across the table. Because, let's be honest, calling Juhyun's reckless looting scouting is a massive stretch. Seola rubs her temples in sheer exhaustion. She knows exactly what Juhyun is doing. He is not scouting, he is hoarding treasures in his private vault. He even named his latest tomb after himself, which is a whole new level of flexing. Right on cue, the giant monitor in the room glitches out, and Juhyun's smug face fills the screen, completely derailing the serious meeting. The board members jump in surprise as Juhyun casually complains about his team not answering his calls, completely ignoring the fact that they are in a highly confidential briefing. Seola sighs, patiently pointing out that they are currently in the middle of a major international summit. Juhyun is already preparing to hang up, but Julian slams his hands on the table, leaning in close to demand where their chaotic leader is and what he is stealing this time. Juhyun just rests his chin on his hand, flashing a smirk while musing that Majesty sounds a bit too basic. Maybe he should upgrade his title to Tomb Raider Emperor. Before Julian can pop a blood vessel, the feed cuts to black, leaving the boardroom in a very awkward silence. The head official rubs his temple, completely giving up on enforcing the rules, and weakly suggests they just move on to the next disaster on the agenda. Back in the dusty ruins, Juhyun stands in a massive chamber covered in ancient hieroglyphs, looking down at a small stone pedestal. With a burst of blue flames, he pulls out a glowing, wicked-looking dagger. This is the Poisonous Fang of Isis, a highly dangerous double S-rank consumable relic. It is a lethal weapon, and while he appreciates the power, there is a tiny hint of disappointment in his eyes. He was expecting a bit more of a challenge. Suddenly, a swirling vortex of dark feathers and energy appears behind him, accompanied by a feminine voice asking why he looks so bored. Stepping out of the shadows is the Raven, the human form of the three-legged crow, a god-grade entity. She points out that any normal raider would be crying tears of joy to find a weapon like this. Juhyun looks up at the massive ceiling, admitting that for a tomb of this scale, he was hoping for something truly game-changing. He laughs, mentioning he was hoping to snag a relic from the sun god Ra. The Raven just rolls her eyes, completely done with his infinite greed. But as she looks at him, her expression softens. She knows his obsession with gathering power isn't just about greed anymore. Something else is driving him. Juhyun smiles, spinning the blade in his hand. He admits that when you are about to become a parent, you naturally want to secure the absolute best future for your kid. The scene shifts to a bright, modern university hospital surrounded by quiet green trees rustling in the breeze. Inside a quiet clinic room, a doctor points to a small, dark circle on an ultrasound screen, explaining the early signs of a new life. Tears of pure happiness fill Irene's eyes. Clutching the ultrasound photo, she hears the doctor confirm that she is officially 5 weeks pregnant. Joo-hyun rushes into the room, and Irene throws herself into his arms, laughing and crying as they celebrate the miracle they have been waiting for. Holding his wife tight, Joo-hyun closes his eyes, a single tear of joy slipping down his face as he whispers how incredibly grateful he is. Irene buries her face in his shoulder, her bright smile radiating pure relief and warmth in the safety of his embrace. As they walk out of the hospital, Joo-hyun proudly wraps his arm around her, jokingly asking if they should use a prediction relic to find out the baby's gender. Irene just laughs, teasing him for being so impatient. Later, back in his office, Joo-hyun sits staring at the ultrasound photo, completely captivated by the tiny spark of life on the paper. His peaceful moment is immediately ruined by Julian, who dumps a massive stack of books on his desk, dryly telling his captain to actually do some work for once. Joo-hyun complains about Julian ruining his beautiful fatherly moment, but Julian just points to the endless mountains of relic documents waiting to be sorted. To make things worse, Jae-ha scampers over with yet another heavy pile of books, complaining that this is the price of having a king who prefers raiding over doing his actual homework. Giving him a stern look, Julian warns Joo-hyun that he is officially grounded and cannot leave the office until every single book is sorted. Sighing heavily, Joo-hyun grumbles about his team's terrible attitude, lazily flipping through the dusty leather-bound volumes. Suddenly, his hand stops over a very strange, dark book at the bottom of the pile. A cold shiver runs down his spine as he looks at the weird webbing on the cover. A pointed red tail suddenly slithers out from the pages like a snake. The eye on the cover flares with a creepy crimson light, and a chilling voice echoes directly in his mind, offering a playful, demonic greeting. In an instant, a massive wave of ink-black darkness erupts from the book, swallowing the entire room and isolating Joo-hyun in a pitch-black void. Floating in the dark, the mysterious book hovers in front of him, its red tail coiling. It speaks with an unsettling familiarity, recognizing him as the latest champion in a long line of rulers. Joo-hyun's eyes narrow into a dangerous glare. He demands to know what this creepy thing is and what kind of nonsense it is trying to pull. The giant crimson eye on the book widens, completely ignoring his anger. It coldly states that before they go any further, Joo-hyun must choose a path for humanity: obedience, massacre, or neglect. Glowing red screens appear in the dark. The first option, obedience, requires humanity to be sacrificed to feed the relics. The second, massacre, offers him absolute power to destroy his enemies and build a forced utopia. The final option is neglect, leaving humanity entirely unprotected to deal with the relics' chaotic contracts on their own. The book mockingly asks if he will just stand by and watch the world burn. Joo-hyun grimaces, biting his thumb in frustration. He realizes that every single choice is completely rigged to cause endless suffering. Shoving his hands in his pockets, he turns his back on the screens, telling the book to shut up with its cheap ultimatums. Looking over his shoulder, his blue eyes glowing with absolute authority, Joo-hyun declares that he has already proven his strength as majesty. He has zero interest in playing their rigged games. The book hovers silently in the red void, humming softly as it processes his defiance. The crimson eye shifts, turning incredibly cold and calculating as it notes that the great majesty is choosing to delay his decision. The eye narrows into a sharp slit, letting out a sinister chuckle. It softly warns him that this hesitation is a choice he will very soon regret. With a sudden splash, the dark void dissolves, and Joo-hyun is back in his office, staring at a normal wall as the last traces of the black ink fade away. He stands frozen, a heavy, unsettling feeling settling deep in his chest as he tries to process the eerie encounter. Without saying a single word to his team, Joo-hyun walks right past them, his face dark and unreadable as he heads straight for the exit. Jae-ha calls out in confusion, asking if he is really leaving his work unfinished, but Jo-yeon simply tells them not to look for him as he heads home to his private sanctuary, Valhalla Palace. Sitting cross-legged in a quiet, white, meditative space, Joo-hyun closes his eyes, trying to clear his mind. Slowly, his breathing deepens, and his consciousness begins to drift into a dream. In the soft, warm light of his subconscious, the sound of tiny footsteps echoes. He opens his eyes to see a small, dark-haired girl in a blue dress running toward him. The little girl looks up, her face lighting up with a radiant, pure smile as she reaches out her tiny hands, happily calling him Dad. Joo-hyun's heart completely melts. A soft, incredibly gentle smile spreads across his face as he looks at the beautiful child, instantly realizing who she is. Kneeling down, his voice filled with awe, he asks if she is indeed his future daughter, silently thanking the ancient childbirth relic for sending him this beautiful vision. The little girl giggles, wrapping her tiny, warm hand around his fingers, bringing an overwhelming sense of peace to his soul. But in an instant, her blue eyes fill with tears. Strange, crackling lines of golden energy begin to splinter across her skin, and she cries out in terror as her tiny body starts to break apart. Joo-hyun reaches out in absolute panic, his heart shattering as the little girl tearfully begs him to remember her, crying that she has to be born so she can protect him. Before he can catch her, a blinding, violent explosion of golden light erupts, swallowing the child and tearing his dream world to pieces. With a desperate, terrified gasp, Joo-hyun bolts upright in his bed, sweat pouring down his face as his hand claws at the empty air. Beside him, Irene is still sleeping peacefully under the warm blankets, completely unaware of the terrifying nightmare that has left her husband shaking in the dark. Unable to shake the lingering dread, Joo-hyun rushes Irene back to the hospital the very next morning, desperately needing to make sure everything is okay. In the quiet exam room, the doctor looks a bit puzzled, pointing out that they don't have an appointment and gently asking if something is wrong. Nodding silently, the doctor prepares the ultrasound machine, but as she glides the scanner over Irene's stomach, her eyes suddenly widen in absolute shock. Seeing the doctor freeze, Joo-hyun's heart drops. He steps forward, his voice tight and trembling as he asks what is wrong. Irene stares up in mounting horror, her face turning pale as she hears the doctor whisper the impossible, devastating truth. The baby is completely gone. Covering her mouth to muffle her tears, Irene weeps as the doctor frantically checks the screen, stammering that there is absolutely no medical explanation for how a healthy baby could just vanish. Joo-hyun stands frozen. His eyes are wide with a terrifying mix of shock, disbelief, and a rapidly rising, dangerous fury. In his mind, the tragic image of his crying daughter breaking into golden dust flashes, her desperate plea to be remembered echoing in his ears. And deep within his mind, the demonic eye of the black book flares to life, letting out a mocking laugh as if to say, "I warned you." Back in the quiet hospital room, Joo-hyun holds his sobbing wife close to his chest. Physically, Irene is completely fine, but the cruel reality of their empty womb hangs over them like a suffocating nightmare. Joo-hyun's eyes narrow, cold and sharp as ice. He knows this isn't a medical tragedy. This is a direct, deliberate strike from the ancient powers he dared to defy. Retreating to a quiet, secluded temple, Joo-hyun stands in the dark, his voice cutting through the silence as he commands a specific power to show itself. A glowing spindle wrapped in pristine white threads appears. This is the Temple of Ilethia, an A-class treasure left by the ancient goddess of childbirth. The relic immediately complains about being summoned like a cheap parlor trick. Joo-hyun cuts it off coldly, demanding that the relic locate his child and check her current condition right now. Sensing his terrifying aura, the spindle quickly complies, weaving its glowing threads into the air as it searches the spiritual planes. Suddenly it gasps, confirming that the child's life spark is still burning, but she has been dragged to an entirely different realm. The spindle explains that the baby is trapped in a state of limbo where she cannot be born. Joo-hyun's face contorts in desperate anger as he demands to know exactly where they took her. But the relic weakly admits its power is limited, and it cannot peer into the deep dark void where the higher tier powers reside. Joo-hyun sits at his desk, his fingers locked together as he glares at the floating artifact with terrifying authority, giving the relic exactly 10 seconds to find a solution. Suddenly, Jae-ha bursts into the office, looking completely stressed out as he complains about being summoned in the middle of such a bizarre, terrifying crisis. Before Jae-ha can even finish his rant, Joo-hyun grabs him, aggressively shaking his exhausted restorer and telling him to stop wasting precious time. Tears of pure frustration stream down Jae-ha's face as he screams back, pointing out that Joo-hyun is the one who skips every official duty only to dump impossible work on him at the last second. Ilya calmly interrupts, explaining the absolute gravity of the situation. Their captain's unborn daughter has been stolen. Before Jae-ha can even process how that is possible, Joo-hyun shoves a strange doll-like pillow and an old book into his arms, ordering him to restore them immediately. Jae-ha blinks in confusion at the weird objects, and Joo-hyun explains they are Morpheus's pillow and the ancient dream interpretation notebook, Onera Critica. Leaning back, Joo-hyun explains that he raided the Greek relics section to find a way to dive back into his warning dream, and he needs Julian to act as the interpreter once the artifacts are fixed. Grumbling under his breath, Jae-ha pulls out his mystical restoration brush, channeling his energy to repair the worn-out, glowing pillow under Julian's watchful eye. To give you some quick context, Morpheus is the ancient Greek god of dreams, known for hovering through the night sky to breathe messages into the minds of the sleeping. It is one of those classic myth tropes where gods just can't seem to mind their own business. Born from that exact legend, this magical pillow holds the unique power to force a sleeper to re-enter and perfectly relive a dream they have already experienced. Beside it sits the ancient thesis relic, Onera Critica, a legendary guide used to extract and decode the deep secrets hidden within those recovered dreams. Written by an ancient scholar, this tome is actually humanity's oldest surviving manual for decoding the mysteries of the dreaming mind. It is basically the ultimate dream dictionary, minus the weird modern interpretations. Ju-hyun settles back, preparing to put his mind under the artifact's influence while Ilya looks on silently, the weight of the experiment hanging heavily in the room. With a proud grin, Jae-ha finishes his work, declaring that the restoration of both ancient artifacts is officially complete. With the team gathered around, Ju-hyun lays his head on the restored pillow. Swirling misty blue energy rises immediately, wrapping around his body as his consciousness is pulled deep into the dream state. Julian stands over him, holding the ancient manual as the magical blue mist swirls around his face, his eyes sharp and focused as he begins to decode the unfolding vision. Inside the restored dream, Ju-hyun is back on his knees, holding his daughter's tiny hands as she looks up at him with deep, tearful eyes. Crying bitter tears as golden cracks split her small form, she weeps that the ancient relics have decreed she must never be allowed to exist. A violent vortex of wind and golden light erupts, tearing her away once more. In the real world, Julian lets out a sharp gasp as a sudden backlash of raw energy crackles against his glasses. Suddenly, the magical pillow beneath Ju-hyun's head violently explodes in a burst of hot, crackling flames, prompting a panicked scream from Jae-ha. Irene rushes to Ju-hyun's side, her face pale with worry as she checks him for injuries, but he quickly assures her that he is completely fine. In a moment of pure comedic panic, Irene wraps bandages incredibly tightly around Ju-hyun's head, sobbing about what she would do if he got hurt too. Seola just stands there with a massive sweat drop, witnessing the classic overprotective wife trope. Pulling the tight bandage up to look at Julian, Ju-hyun's voice turns dead serious as he asks what the dream manual revealed about the threat they are facing. Julian stares at the glowing, illuminated pages of the Onira Critica, his expression grim as he confirms that the baby's connection to the relics is incredibly deep. Jae-ha looks on in sheer disbelief, struggling to comprehend why the ancient artifacts would go to such extreme lengths to stop a single baby from being born. Adjusting his cracked glasses, Julian explains that according to the ancient text, the truth is far more terrifying than they imagined. A glitching, distorted image of Ju-hyun and Irene's family photo appears. Julian reveals that the child destined to be born carries a power so overwhelmingly massive that the relics themselves are terrified of her existence. That terrifying godlike potential is what triggered the relics' collective judgment, manifesting as the tragic splintering dream Ju-hyun experienced. Julian holds up his shattered glasses, pointing to the burnt ash-covered remains of the pillow. He notes that for A-class artifacts to be completely destroyed by a mere memory, it means the entity behind this kidnapping is operating at an absolute god-tier level. Ju-hyun's gaze turns incredibly dark. A double S-class god-tier artifact is the one holding his daughter hostage. Suddenly, the room temperature plunges, and a familiar mocking voice echoes as dark purple energy flares behind Ju-hyun. The black book manifests once more, teasing him for trying to find a safe way out. Ju-hyun whirls around, his teeth clenched in raw fury as he glares at the floating demonic book. The book's crimson eye glows brightly, mockingly pointing out that this tragedy is the direct result of Ju-hyun's stubborn hesitation. The book summons the glowing red screens once more, but this time, a new golden-bordered option appears at the bottom. Negotiation. The negotiation screen reveals a path that grants him the status of one of the 12 executors, promising safety, prosperity, and wealth for his family if he agrees to manage the relics across all world lines. Ju-hyun stares at the glowing screens, a cold, mocking smirk playing on his lips as he points out how blatantly skewed and rigged these options are. Leaning in close, his eyes blazing with a dangerous light, he accuses the book of orchestrating this entire crisis just to force him into choosing the negotiation path. The book shivers with anticipation, its red tail wagging as it eagerly assumes that Ju-hyun has finally seen the value in submitting to their terms. But with absolute chilling calm, Ju-hyun speaks a single word: massacre. The book's eye freezes in sheer shock. The book stammers in panic, frantically waving its tail as it pleads with him to reconsider, arguing that a Grand Majesty should choose a far more cooperative path. Ju-hyun raises his hand, a terrifying, swirling red aura of destructive energy erupting from his palm. He sneers that a brutal path like massacre suits his nasty temper perfectly. The book opens its pages wide, hesitantly offering to grant him the power of erasure, nervously asking who he wants to destroy first. Looking the book dead in its crimson eye, Ju-hyun delivers his answer with chilling precision. He wants to erase every single relic in existence. The book flies backward in a fit of absolute rage, its pages flapping wildly as it screams that relics are not valid targets, demanding he choose someone from humanity. Flipping its pages violently, the book bellows in outrage, calling him a blasphemous traitor who is supposed to protect the artifacts, not destroy them. Ju-hyun's face contorts into a terrifying, bloodthirsty snarl, his teeth bared in raw, unbridled rage. Leaning in so close his aura suffocates the room, he growls that the relics dare to steal his daughter, an innocent child who hasn't even had the chance to take her first breath. He demands they return her immediately, or he will personally slaughter every last one of them. Realizing that this is a man who cannot be reasoned with or controlled, the book snaps shut, floating back in angry defiance. The red tail whips through the air as the book coldly declares that all negotiations are officially over, and that Ju-hyun has brought a terrible punishment upon himself. Swirling clouds of dark, toxic ink begin to seep into the room, dripping down from the ceiling as Julian and Jae-ha watch in mounting apprehension. The book's parting words echo through the dark. It warns him that a great disaster is about to begin, mockingly wishing him luck in surviving the coming collapse. As the dark mist fades, Ju-hyun stands panting in the center of the room. Jae-ha blinks, completely confused by his captain's sudden dramatic outburst and asking if he was even listening to them. Jo-hyun rubs his head in exhaustion, muttering a quiet no, which prompts Jae-ha to scream in comical frustration about his captain spacing out during an emergency. Irene walks up, placing a gentle, worried hand on his shoulder, but Ju-hyun simply covers his face, struggling to process the terrifying weight of the war he has just declared. Peering through his fingers, his eyes are filled with a grim, heavy determination. The stakes are no longer about wealth or power, this is a fight for his family's survival. Suddenly, the heavy office doors are violently thrown open with a loud crash, startling everyone in the room. Chloe Laurent stands at the threshold, her face pale with panic and her hair disheveled as she gasps out a frantic warning. Ju-hyun looks up sharply as Chloe reveals the horrifying truth. Out in the city streets, ordinary citizens are suddenly collapsing, their bodies violently erupting with chaotic, glowing relic energy. The disaster has officially begun. Soon after, the first massive anomaly hit the cities. Bypassing every defense network on Earth, powerful, unregistered artifacts began randomly spawning out of nowhere, right in the middle of crowded streets. Inside a secure testing room, a rough, crackling stone relic sits on a metal tray, humming with unstable static electricity. A technician in white gloves carefully inspects the strange object, while a confused citizen stammers that he simply found it tucked inside his pocket with no idea where it came from. The tension in the facility is palpable as an impatient man in a gym tank top barks at the citizen to hurry up and step aside. Outside the testing booths, a massive, chaotic line of anxious citizens stretches down the hall, each desperately clutching some bizarre, newly spawned artifact they are terrified to hold. Over at the towering skyscraper of Guardian headquarters, the lights remain fully ablaze as the crew pulls an all-night shift to analyze the growing global threat. Staring into a massive wooden crate overflowing with ancient shields, plates, and candles, Jae-ha notes with deep worry that these items are manifesting without even generating a protective tomb. Carrying another heavy box, Jae-ha warns Ju-hyun that the real danger lies in the citizens who are actively keeping and using these random artifacts instead of surrendering them. He pulls up a viral video of a smug teenager using a newly spawned luck artifact to completely sweep a local casino, demonstrating how quickly society is sliding into lawless chaos. It turns out that when the world is ending, the first thing people do is try to cheat at blackjack. Ilya passes by carrying a crate of his own, checking his phone as he delivers the grimmest piece of news yet: their global detection system is failing. The team walks deep into the laboratory toward a massive, swirling green sphere of energy known as the Eye of the Sky, which holds the comprehensive data of every discovered artifact on Earth. A system scan activates, casting bright beams of light across a simple ceramic teapot that recently materialized. The system interface blinks with a stark error message. The scanner has absolutely no record of the item, proving these newly spawned objects are completely outside their known reality. Before they can digest the implications, Chloe and Seola sprint into the lab, their faces pale with panic as they shout that another catastrophic anomaly has just occurred. Turning around, Ju-hyun listens in grim silence as Chloe explains that future timeline events are suddenly being violently pulled forward into the present day. Horrific reports are already flooding the news networks, displaying verified announcements of key international leaders dying long before their scheduled times. Chloe's voice trembles as she looks at her screen, hesitantly revealing that the system has also scheduled Ju-hyun's own death for September 18th. A heavy, chilling silence blankets the room as Ju-hyun stands frozen, a cold sweat breaking out on his face at the sheer unnatural creepiness of the prediction. Suddenly, the giant green scanner flickers wildly and dies. An automated emergency broadcast rings out, announcing a massive, widespread power grid failure. Standing in the sudden darkness of the control room, Ju-hyun looks over his shoulder, his eyes sharp as he realizes the attacks are getting highly targeted. Outside, the sprawling metropolis is instantly plunged into pitch-black shadow, the towering skyscrapers losing all light as a massive blackout sweeps across the city. Gritting his teeth in frustration, Ju-hyun demands to know the source of the sudden power drain, sensing a massive surge of hostile energy. The source is located far away at Power Plant Core 5 on the Colorado Plateau, where the captured Greek god Zeus is kept locked away to generate electricity. Suddenly, a blinding, crackling bolt of golden lightning tears through the concrete towers of the plant, illuminating the night sky. A massive, violent explosion of raw electricity rips the power plant apart, scattering heavy concrete debris and dust into the air. Terrified workers scramble in a blind panic through the smoke, screaming at their squads to evacuate immediately as the Zeus artifact breaks completely out of control. A colossal footclad in a simple leather sandal slams heavily onto the cracked concrete, shaking the very foundation of the facility. Emerging from the smoke is the towering, muscular form of the double S-rank chief god Zeus, lightning crackling around his white beard as he roars to find his captor. Zeus vows to take his brutal revenge on the one who humiliated him, but his rant is instantly cut short as Ju-hyun calmly steps into view, completely unfazed. Ju-hyun casually tells the fleeing workers to clear the area, receiving frantic shouts of gratitude as they scramble past him to safety. Looking up at the massive deity, Ju-hyun mockingly remarks that Zeus is throwing an awfully big tantrum for someone who is currently missing his most crucial, manhood-defining asset. With a smug, dangerous grin, Ju-hyun reaches into his coat and pulls out a plastic Ziploc bag containing a heavily pixelated, highly sensitive, severed body part of the god. Yes, our protagonist is literally threatening a chief deity with a pixelated Ziploc bag. Standard Tomb Raider negotiating tactics. He dangles the bagged double S rank god tier consumable relic, teasing the giant deity with an agonizingly casual tone. Zeus's eyes flare with a murderous, bloodshot rage, his veins bulging as his face turns purple with absolute humiliation. With a furious roar, Zeus lunges forward, unleashing a devastating storm of golden lightning that Ju-hyun barely avoids with a swift, acrobatic slide. Ju-hyun quickly recovers, darting forward like a shadow to deliver a powerful counterstrike directly into the god's midsection. But as the blow lands, Ju-hyun's eyes widen in surprise. The impact feels entirely different. His absolute dominance power isn't taking effect. Before he can adapt, Zeus swings a massive lightning-infused fist, landing a heavy blow that sends Ju-hyun skidding backward across the cracked floor. Ju-hyun slides to a halt, using his hand to stabilize himself as he struggles to comprehend why his signature dominance has failed to bind the deity. Zeus thunders forward to press his advantage. Ju-hyun realizes that Zeus breaking his seals in the first place makes absolutely no sense, marking this as yet another rigged anomaly. Screaming with arrogant triumph, Zeus swings another world-ending punch, declaring he will teach this puny human a lesson he will never survive. Ju-hyun simply smirks, raising his hand to summon a massive, white-ribboned golden frame floating in a swirling vortex of blue energy. The massive frame crashes down, slamming directly into Zeus's back with a heavy, metallic thud. Instantly, beautiful pink roses and thick white bandages erupt from the artifact, wrapping tightly around the god's muscular arms and binding him fast. Zeus screams in sheer confusion, his godlike strength completely vanishing as he finds himself tied up like a wedding present, surrounded by glowing roses. Ju-hyun stands calmly, explaining that this is Hera's throne, a double S-rank relic belonging to Zeus's long-suffering wife. It acts as a perfect reform tool designed to force cooperation. Looking at him with a cold, merciless gaze, Ju-hyun points out that when it comes to punishing a husband who betrayed his marriage, the binding efficiency of Hera's relic increases by 1,000%. It turns out the artifact's domestic anger multiplier is highly effective. Sweat pours down Zeus's face as he panics, desperately screaming at Ju-hyun to undo the humiliating, suffocating bind. Smiling wickedly, Ju-hyun reaches back into his jacket, casually mentioning that he brought along an artifact belonging to another one of Zeus's wives. He pulls out a sharp, elegant golden crown glowing with mystical energy, Metis's god-toppling wisdom, another highly dangerous double S-rank artifact. To give you some context on Greek mythology, Metis was the first wife of Zeus and the goddess of wisdom. Zeus swallowed her whole to prevent a prophecy about their future child overthrowing him. But Metis survived inside his belly, giving birth to and raising their child deep within the dark confines of his own body. Eventually, the child grew up inside him, preparing for the ultimate escape. Plagued by a splitting headache, Zeus ordered his skull cracked open, and out leapt Athena, a fully grown, heavily armored goddess of war. Zeus stares in pure, unadulterated horror as the golden crown of Metis flares with a threatening, deep blue fire in Ju-hyun's hand. Channeling the crown's power, Ju-hyun transforms the relic into a massive, heavy metallic gauntlet, grinning as he asks the god if he's ready to experience a splitting headache of his own. He leaps high into the air, the massive steel fist gleaming with raw kinetic energy. With a wild, bloodthirsty grin, Ju-hyun screams at Zeus to try giving birth to a son from his skull this time, throwing his entire weight behind the blow. The monstrous metallic gauntlet slams directly into Zeus's skull with a deafening crash, unleashing a massive shockwave of blue energy that shatters the surrounding floor. Zeus lets out a gargled scream of agony, his eyes rolling back as the force of the strike rattles his brain. But Ju-hyun has no intention of stopping, swinging the massive steel fist down a second time, shouting that a single strike isn't nearly enough to pay for his defiance. With a satisfied smirk, Ju-hyun charges the golden gauntlet with a final, blinding surge of mystical power. The bound, battered deity crashes hard into the cracked stone, completely defeated and unconscious. Ju-hyun stands over him, letting out a breath as he cold-bloodedly reminds the fallen god that he should have stayed quiet and generated electricity as he was told. Turning around, Ju-hyun casually tells Jae-ha to get to work restoring the damaged deity, receiving an outraged scream from his exhausted restorer. Jae-ha points dramatically at Zeus's flattened head, frantically asking why their captain always has to resort to such cartoonish, brutal violence. Ju-hyun simply scratches his cheek with a bored expression, dryly admitting that he did it simply because he felt like hitting him. Jae-ha sighs deeply, reluctantly preparing his tools as he grumbles about his miserable life and wonders why Ju-hyun went as far as tearing the god's manhood off. From a high angle looking down at the massive cracked crater in the floor, Ju-hyun simply tells his complaining companion to shut up. High above on a cliffside, a mysterious, shadowed figure wearing sleek glasses sits perched in the moonlight, smirking down at the destruction. He quietly notes how utterly merciless Ju-hyun is toward the relics. Zooming in on his glinting glasses, the figure smiles coldly, whispering that this ruthless display is exactly what he was hoping to see. Back on the ground, Ju-hyun folds his arms, sensing the strange, lingering presence in the air as he whispers with a dangerous grin that things are about to get interesting. Though Zeus's chaotic rebellion was successfully put down, a heavy, unsettling cloud of doubt continued to loom over the team. The questions kept piling up. Why did the power plant's advanced suppression systems fail so completely? And how did a sealed, high-ranking god like Zeus manage to shatter his bonds? Ju-hyun suspected the creepy demonic book Relic was pulling the strings from the shadows. Sitting in his office reviewing files, Ju-hyun's attention is suddenly grabbed as a television screen on the wall spontaneously sparks to life. The screen buzzes with static, and a chillingly cheerful voice rings out, welcoming the world to a special daily broadcast of their death toll news. It seems the Relics are launching their own true crime network. The display reveals a slender, shadowed figure wearing a formal suit and a smiling white mask, standing triumphantly before a massive wooden guillotine. The camera pans out to reveal a horrific, crimson-lit arena where 3 floating Egyptian deities tower over a line of bound, gagged human captives. The broadcast identifies the 3 SS-ranked deities assisting the executioner: Set, the god of evil; Osiris, the god of fertility; and Anubis, the jackal-headed lord of the dead. Ju-hyun groans in annoyance at the bizarre theatricality, just as Jae-ha kicks the door open, panting in sheer panic. Jae-ha shoves his phone forward, showing the exact same horrifying live broadcast of bound hostages playing on his screen, stammering that they cannot turn it off. He warns that this isn't a localized hack. Every single computer screen and mobile device inside Guardian headquarters has been overridden by the same signal. Throughout the office, workers panic as their monitors freeze on the crimson-tinted image of the Egyptian execution arena, completely locked out of their systems. Outside on the streets, giant electronic billboards display the terrifying gods, freezing the entire city in a state of quiet, mounting terror. Back on the screen, the masked master of ceremonies leans into his microphone, cheerfully asking the global audience if they are ready to begin the judgment of the guilty. The camera zooms in on the cold, green-skinned face of Osiris, who looks down with absolute, merciless indifference. The host presents their first prisoner, a weeping man bound tightly beneath the heavy, glittering blade of the guillotine, accused of kidnapping and hurting children. The broadcast cuts to a crowd of masked spectators in matching red suits, chanting wildly for the man's execution. Delighted by the bloodlust, the host tilts his head, happily declaring the verdict of guilty. The camera holds a close-up of the sweating, terrified prisoner as the massive, heavy blade is released, sliding down with a sharp metallic screech. As the screen turns blood red, Jae-ha screams in absolute horror, clutching his head in disgust while Ju-hyun watches with a tight, dark expression. The host immediately moves to the second prisoner, a trembling man accused of faking starvation to hoard extra relief supplies, asking the global audience if they approve of his death. The chat feed on the broadcast erupts with arguments, some stating death is far too extreme for a simple lie, while others bloodthirstily demand his execution anyway. The heavy blade falls again. Jae-ha turns green with disgust, screaming that these entities are completely insane and are just using justice as an excuse to eliminate people. Jae-ha begs Joo-hyun to intervene before the entire global public is traumatized. Below the screen, a support hotline number is prominently displayed. The bold banner urges the viewers to call the displayed number to join and support the god's righteous executions. Staring closely at the long string of symbols, Joo-hyun notes that this is clearly a magical contact method rather than a standard phone number. Without a second thought, Joo-hyun pulls up his keypad and presses the call button, ready to trace the source. Instantly, the concrete floor beneath their feet splits open with a violent surge of crimson light, completely catching them off guard. Jae-ha screams as he is sucked down into a swirling spatial rift, surrounded by giant floating red eyes watching their descent. Jo-hyun dives smoothly through the void, keeping his eyes sharp and his body controlled as he aims his drop. With a heavy thud, they crash land onto a dusty red-carpeted floor. Jae-ha groans in pain, clutching his bruised back. Looking up through the massive frame of the wooden guillotine, they realize they have teleported directly into the center of the live broadcast arena. Jae-ha gasps in horror at the giant, floating red eyes lining the dark sky. Joo-hyun casually stands, noting that his tracking theory was spot on. Channeling his energy, a brilliant crackling beam of blue light manifests in Joo-hyun's hand. He materializes a beautiful lethal silver trident, coldly calling the host's high-stakes trial a pathetic cheap circus. With a powerful sweeping slash, he shatters the massive wooden guillotine into flying splinters, instantly halting the scheduled execution. The crowd mutters in anger at the sudden intrusion, but the masked host quickly recovers, cheerfully announcing to the audience that a new, highly anticipated target has arrived. The three towering Egyptian deities step forward, their eyes locking onto Joo-hyun as they surround the perimeter of the arena. The host declares Joo-hyun guilty, unleashing a massive dark slash of energy. Joo-hyun leaps forward, meeting the attack head-on with a powerful blue glowing fist. With a loud crackle, Joo-hyun's hand shatters a massive block of conjured ice, completely neutralizing the god's offensive. He slams his fist into the ground, unleashing a shockwave that cracks the floor as he fiercely challenges the gods to stand trial themselves. Anubis and Set growl in surprise, startled by the sheer, unbridled aggression of this human intruder. Without giving them a moment to breathe, Joo-hyun lunges forward like a shadow, targeting the green-skinned Osiris first. He delivers a devastating, light-infused kick directly into Osiris's jaw, mocking the god's verdict with his own cry of guilty. He spins midair, landing a heavy, bone-crushing punch straight into the chest of the golden-haired Set. He finishes the combo by driving his fist directly into Anubis's dark jackal face, sending all three deities crashing backward. Osiris slowly rises, dusting himself off with a cold chuckle. He sneers that while Joo-hyun's physical strength is impressive, simple mortal blows cannot stop true gods. Joo-hyun narrows his eyes, sensing something hollow about their energies and realizing these three are hiding a massive secret. He draws his lethal double S rank dagger, Isis's poisonous fang, preparing to fight to tear their godlike status completely apart. To understand what is about to happen, you need to know a quick mythological concept. In ancient Egyptian lore, knowing a deity's true name grants absolute power over them. Isis used this exact trick on the sun god Ra. The legend tells of how the goddess Isis used a venomous serpent to strike down the sun god Ra, offering to cure his agony only if he revealed his true secret name. Yielding to the poison, Ra surrendered his true name, which held the very essence of his divine authority, passing his power down to secure his family's dynasty. Set lets out a mocking laugh, lunging at Joo-hyun as he derides the tiny glowing dagger as nothing more than a useless toothpick. Joo-hyun simply smiles, the silver blade of the poisonous fang flaring with a bright, blinding white energy. As he slashes through the air, glowing ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics burn directly onto Set's muscular chest. Joo-hyun loudly chants the god's secret name, Setek, the confused one. He coldly declares that the god's fake authority holds absolutely no power over him anymore. Instantly, Set collapses heavily to his knees, his golden skin crackling with red energy as his power evaporates, leaving the masked host in a state of utter shock. Darting toward Osiris next, Joo-hyun reads the glowing runes, dryly noting that Asar, King of the Dead, is an incredibly uninspired secret name. Osiris screams in agony as the glowing script cuts through his form, while the dark jackal Anubis retreats in absolute terror. Joo-hyun spins, weaving his blade through the air to write the final runes as he calls out Anubis's true name, Inpu, ruler of the tomb. With a final shriek, Anubis is torn completely apart in a brilliant explosion of white and red energy. Ju-hyun lands gracefully amidst the smoke, the fake gods dissolving into piles of harmless ash at his feet. Jae-ha runs over, complaining about the sheer mess and whining about how much effort it will take to restore these shattered high-rank artifacts. The masked hosts and spectators take a step back, sweating in sheer terror as the human duo casually walks toward them. Suddenly, Ju-hyun swings his blade in a clean, blinding arc, decapitating Jae-ha with absolutely zero hesitation. Talk about a drastic approach to solving team complaints. The severed head of Jae-ha bounces onto the floor, his face suddenly twisting into a grotesque, wide smile as he lets out a sinister chuckle. Ju-hyun watches calmly as the headless body and the severed head melt into a pool of thick, foul-smelling red mud. Within seconds, the entire arena, the audience, and the masked hosts melt away, revealing that the entire setup was a massive, orchestrated illusion. From the deep shadows of the sludge, a smooth, mocking voice echoes, praising Ju-hyun's legendary instincts for spotting the fakes so quickly. A pristine, elegantly dressed version of Yu Jae-ha slowly rises from the red slime, wearing a sleek suit and a heavy overcoat, his eyes glowing with a cold intelligence. Staring at the newcomer, Ju-hyun's eyes narrow in deep suspicion. He knows this elegant entity is absolutely not his teammate. Standing face to face in the desolate arena, Ju-hyun demands to know why this imposter went to such extreme lengths to hide the real gods and stage this elaborate execution farce. The elegant imposter, or should we say, the far better dressed version of Jae-ha, chuckles, admitting that Ju-hyun is indeed incredibly sharp, but points out that the captain has missed one vital, world-shattering detail. He raises his hand, revealing a glinting golden majesty ring wrapped tightly around his finger. Ju-hyun's heart drops. He glares at the ring, his voice turning into a dangerous, low growl as he demands to know when the hell the imposter stole his ring. The imposter smiles warmly, tilting his head as he softly clarifies that this golden ring is and always has been his own. Both men stand opposite each other, their hands raised as identical, golden majesty rings gleam brightly under the dark sky. The imposter mockingly notes that Ju-hyun is not the only king chosen by the relics. Ju-hyun stares at the sophisticated double, his face contorted in a mix of shock and rising fury. The real Jae-ha stares in absolute horror, his jaw hitting the floor as he, Julian, and Seola struggle to comprehend the impossible sight of his own sophisticated double sitting right before them. Pointing a trembling finger, Jae-ha panics over the arrival of a literal doppelganger, while Julian stands frozen, his highly logical mind completely breaking down at the sight. Adjusting his glasses with a quiet, refined sigh, the double calls their chaotic reaction incredibly rude, noting that even if their faces are identical, their inner presence is worlds apart. He raises his hand, revealing a gleaming gold ring as he calmly announces that he is a majesty from an entirely parallel timeline, one who once stood at the absolute peak of his own dimension. Shaken but stubborn, the original Jae-ha scoffs, pointing back to declare that our world already has its own undisputed king standing right here. The parallel majesty flashes a cold, pitying smirk, mocking Ju-hyun for being an incompetent king who doesn't even realize his entire world is actively standing on the brink of total ruin. With a casual toss, several ancient items clatter onto the floor, immediately catching Jae-ha's eye as he recognizes them as the powerful Egyptian relics. Gesturing to the artifacts, the parallel majesty dryly suggests they should be thanking him, claiming he personally stole and secured these treasures before their seals could shatter and cause chaos. Jo-hyun's expression darkens into a dangerous glare, his voice laced with venom as he questions if this multiversal thief was also the one responsible for releasing Zeus. The stranger chuckles, telling him not to be so dense. He explains that the sinister cosmic relics orchestrating this disaster were the ones who freed Zeus, and he was merely trying to keep the seals from breaking completely. He warns them that if a god-tier relic goes completely out of control, this world will face absolute destruction, ending up as nothing but silent rubble, just like his own homeworld did. Looking out the large window at the glittering city skyline, the parallel majesty muses that this timeline is beautifully developed, filled with thriving humans and countless active relics. Ju-hyun crosses his arms, his eyes narrowing as he demands to know exactly what this traveler means by the ruin of his world. The parallel majesty turns his head, his face turning dead serious as he explains that there are primordial god-tier entities out there actively traveling across dimensions to destroy worlds. Suddenly, a bright, warm golden light begins to emanate from the floor between them, interrupting their grim conversation. Floating gracefully in the center of the light is June, the triple S rank personification of Majesty's cradle, carrying an aura of absolute serenity. The parallel Majesty stares in pure awe, his glasses reflecting the golden glow as he realizes he is looking at a legendary treasure that is supposed to exist as only a single pair across all dimensions. He notes with a hint of jealousy how incredibly peaceful the cradle looks, while countless other parallel worlds are currently falling into ash and ruin. June smiles softly, gently floating beside Juhyun as he explains that he has simply been protecting the true king's proof, having successfully passed his trials. Looking deeply into Juhyun's eyes, June asks if His Highness has ever heard of the legendary relic creator, the original blacksmith of humanity. He reveals an ancient memory of the blacksmith, a towering figure who fought back when the physical manifestations of human stories and worship began to look down on and enslave humanity. To establish order, the blacksmith forged those godlike stories into tools that humans could safely wield, which are the very artifacts they use today. Yet, certain stories fiercely rebelled against this new order. These rebellious myths refused to exist as mere tools. They shed their relic forms and returned to their raw primordial states. They formed a dangerous coalition, descending upon the mortal realm once more, determined to reign over humanity as absolute rulers. The parallel Majesty steps forward, chiming in that these rebels are the true primordial gods, and the ones leading this multiversal rebellion are all operating at a terrifying god-tier level. He lists the 4 supreme rulers of the major human civilizations: Ra, Enki, Vishnu, and Nuwa, the absolute gods of ancient history. Juhyun rests his chin in his hand, a look of realization dawning on his face as he remembers always wondering why high-tier relics from these massive mythologies had never appeared in the tombs. He recalls how, after conquering every new tomb, he always came up empty-handed when searching for traces of these major pantheons. Hearing this, the original Jaeha and Julian stare in absolute shock, realizing their captain wasn't just raiding tombs for greedy fun, he was silently looking for the missing gods. The parallel Majesty nods, explaining that these gods never appeared because they were too busy staging a rebellion across multiple dimensions, aiming for the absolute control or destruction of every existing world line. Seola and Ilya listen in stunned silence, the sheer, unimaginable scale of the threat weighing heavily on their shoulders. Looking the traveler dead in the eye, Juhyun quietly asks if these 4 supreme deities were the ones who destroyed his home. The traveler looks down, his glasses casting a dark shadow as he whispers a single painful yes. Suddenly, a violent, high-pitched ringing sound pierces the air, and the room begins to vibrate with a strange, ominous frequency. Outside the window, a bizarre crimson energy begins to warp the sky. Inside, the team stumbles as the very fabric of space starts to warp around them. The parallel Majesty grits his teeth, his eyes widening in horror as his glasses reflect a massive, crackling red rift tearing open in the sky right above the city. A terrifying, jagged fissure of pure crimson lightning splits the heavens, emitting a deafening, unnatural rumble that shakes the entire metropolis. Emerging from the rift, a massive, swirling black vortex with a burning golden eye gazes down. A booming, menacing voice echoes across the city, calling the parallel Majesty a fleeing rat and declaring this world is destined for purification. The parallel Majesty immediately bolts for the stairs, cursing that the gods have tracked him across dimensions, while Juhyun follows, demanding to know if this is the work of the 4 civilizations. Desperate for answers, Juhyun summons the triple S rank Akashic records, commanding the legendary library to immediately find the weaknesses and locations of these entities. But as the magical pages flip wildly in his hands, his face pales in shock as the book delivers a devastating message. The records reveal that these invading entities cannot be located because they do not officially exist anywhere within this world line. Running down the corridor with his team, Juhyun realizes they can't even strike back if they don't know where the enemy is hiding. Suddenly, the massive crimson eye in the sky flashes, and the sinister demonic rulebook manifests in a beam of red light, letting out a cruel, mocking laugh as it greets Juhyun once more. The demonic book begins to flip its blood-red pages rapidly, gleefully announcing that the first grand curse upon this world is about to begin. The parallel Majesty whirls around, desperately screaming a warning about the 4 civilizations, but mid-sentence, his voice suddenly devolves into bizarre, garbled static. Juhyun stops in his tracks, his eyes widening in pure shock as he realizes he can no longer understand what his companion is saying. Beside him, June tries to speak, but only meaningless symbols and static escape his lips. He touches his throat in panic, looking at Juhyun in utter confusion. The demonic rulebook cackles, displaying a glowing green tarot card of the tower as it proudly boasts that the world will now return to the absolute silence that existed before human language was ever born. A glowing crimson interface materializes, announcing the activation of the Curse of the Tower of Babel, a worldwide blockade that completely severs all human language, commands, and communication. Ju-hyun stares in horror at the notification, his heart freezing as he realizes the sheer catastrophic scale of a global language blockade. It is basically the ultimate planet-wide silent treatment. Across the city, massive stone towers resembling the Tower of Babel erupt from the ground, crushing buildings as terrified citizens run for their lives, screaming in garbled, incoherent static. Standing on the rooftop, Ju-hyun looks out at the chaos, realizing that with all human communication cut off in a single instant, the world is plunging into an absolute, irreversible disaster. He visualizes the immediate horrific consequences, soldiers in active war zones suddenly unable to understand orders, and surgeons in mid-operation unable to communicate with their teams. His face contorts in deep dread as an even more terrifying thought hits him. What about the global air traffic control networks? Without language to coordinate altitudes and runways, countless planes currently flying in the dark skies will collide, resulting in a horrific fiery catastrophe. Turning frantically to Ilya, Ju-hyun shouts a desperate command, urging his silver-haired teammate to immediately use his powers to stop time. But Ilya only blinks in confusion, gibberish escaping his lips as he struggles to understand his captain's garbled shouts. A glowing system message confirms the absolute blockade of language is fully in effect, making verbal commands completely impossible. Suddenly, the majestic dark-winged crow manifests beside Ju-hyun, her dark blue aura flaring as a system notification reveals that while human language is blocked, the use of relics is still fully active. Grinning with sudden hope, Ju-hyun summons a sharp, elegant writing instrument, Shakespeare's childhood pen. He quickly scribbles a physical command onto his notepad, using the pen's conceptual power to force Ilya's mind to understand his written orders to activate Solomon's time-stopping demon relic. Instantly understanding the written command, Ilya's eyes glow with a sharp blue light as he channels his energy, preparing to summon his demonic power. Ilya roars, summoning the colossal, horned shadow of the demon Furcus, who holds a celestial shield high into the air. The giant demon unleashes a massive, freezing blast of blue energy across the city, shattering a spectral clock face to force the flow of time to a complete grinding halt. In midair, a flock of white birds is instantly frozen in place, suspended motionless against the dark sky. Down on the ground, a terrified citizen running from a collapsing tower is frozen mid-stride, entirely locked in time. High above the clouds, a massive commercial airliner is suspended silently in place, completely safe from crashing. Inside the plane's cabin, a cup of spilled coffee is frozen in midair, the terrified passengers locked in place like statues. Standing on the rooftop, Ju-hyun lets out a long, relieved sigh, a smug grin returning to his face as he looks at his magical pen, confirming they have successfully stopped the immediate catastrophe. The falling stone debris and the panicked citizens remain frozen like statues under the massive towers, bought some precious time by Ilya's demonic power. High above the frozen cityscape, the demonic rulebook hovers silently near the rooftop, its pointed red tail swaying gently against the quiet air. Julian and Ciola look around in awe at the suspended rubble, though they still can only communicate in garbled, frustrated static. The demonic rulebook lets out a delighted chuckle, mockingly praising Ju-hyun for finding such an impressive, creative way to temporarily halt their grand purification. Ju-hyun glares at the floating tome, his eyes narrowing as he realizes the book itself is completely unaffected by the time stop. The book sneers, asking if he really thought a mere mortal relic could freeze its divine authority. The book flips its crimson pages once more, announcing that since he managed to stop the first disaster, it will grant this world some bonus points by immediately unleashing the next curse. A glowing green tarot card depicting gears and a bound figure manifests. The book proudly announces the activation of the Curse of Vishvakarma, the blockade of tools. A massive glowing blue tower erupts from the earth, sending frozen rocks flying as it channels a powerful, neutralizing energy across the city. Looking at the newly risen blue structure, Ju-hyun grimaces as his teammates look on in silent, garbled panic. Suddenly, a sharp, crackling sound catches Ju-hyun's attention, causing him to look down in surprise. The screen of the mobile phone in his hand suddenly webs with deep, glowing green cracks, the device completely dying. Across the rooftop, every electronic device and piece of machinery begins to short-circuit, crackling with green static as Ciola shouts in garbled frustration. Ju-hyun stumbles back as the dark-winged crow lets out a painful cry, crackling green lightning wrapping around her feathers as she is forcibly pulled back into her artifact form. The demonic rulebook hovers triumphantly, explaining that humanity evolved differently from beasts due to only two things: language and tools. It cackles, declaring that it has now successfully stripped humanity of both. A glowing red interface confirms the curse of Vishvakarma has neutralized all human-made tools, technology, and relics. To shed some light on the name of this curse, Vishvakarma is the sacred architect and craftsman god in Hindu mythology, credited with forging the powerful weapons of the heavens. Because the curse is named after the ultimate craftsman, every physical tool and machine inside the frozen offices begins to crumble and shatter. The implications are horrifying. Once time starts moving again, surgeons will find their metal scalpels instantly shattering in their hands. Without the use of tools, human civilization will face an immediate, absolute collapse back into the Stone Age. Joo-hyun's eyes flash with a dangerous light. He notes the specific wording of the curse, realizing the book is trying to sneakily seal their mystical relics as well. Pointing his pen at the book, Joo-hyun loudly demands to know why their ancient relics are being neutralized, questioning if the book is trying to pull a fast one on him. The pen in his hand begins to crackle with hostile green lightning, attempting to reject his grip as the curse tries to neutralize it. Gritting his teeth against the painful shock, Joo-hyun forces his fingers to grip the pen, channeling his raw willpower into the writing instrument. With a fierce roar, he slams the pen down onto his notebook, commanding the relics to remember the very essence of their creation. Seola and Ilya watch in awe as glowing text manifests on the page, declaring that writing is an axe designed to reproduce human thought, and stories are tools that pierce through time. The written runes glow with a blinding white light, asserting that historical records are immortal blades that can never be destroyed by a simple curse. A massive shockwave of pure conceptual energy erupts from the notebook, completely shattering the green curse binding their mystical artifacts. The majestic, dark-winged crow bursts back into existence, landing gracefully on the roof as she sneers at the book, pointing out that the curse only neutralizes human-made tools. And ancient relics born of myth and gods are absolutely not crafted by human hands. The singular eye of the demonic rulebook narrows in deep frustration, letting out an annoyed growl as it is forced to admit defeat and exempt the mystical relics from the tool blockade. Joo-hyun twirls his pen with a smug, triumphant grin, pleased that his quick legal loophole has successfully restored their arsenal. Julian and Seola jump for joy, though they still are hilariously limited to shouting incoherent, garbled noises at each other. Suddenly, the rapid patter of footsteps echoes across the rooftop as someone runs toward them. Jae-ha skids to a halt, panting heavily as he holds out a pair of ornate silver earrings, Solomon's earring of all creation, a high-tier bound relic. Julian and Seola quickly clip the earrings on, and their eyes widen in pure delight as they realize they can finally understand each other's voices perfectly, bypassing the language blockade. Flashing a predatory grin, Joo-hyun points his finger at the annoying book, commanding Ilya to burn the sinister tome to absolute ash. Ilya steps forward, his hand glowing with a fierce purple flame as he summons Phlegethon, the terrifying river of fire from Greek mythology. The massive fire demon unleashes a roaring, torrential stream of hellfire, completely engulfing the demonic rulebook in a white-hot inferno. The book emerges from the flames coughing and sputtering, its cover slightly singed as it reluctantly praises Joo-hyun's team for finding a way to bypass both of its grand curses. Joo-hyun's smile fades slightly, as he notes that despite taking a direct hit from a god-tier fire demon, the annoying book has suffered almost no physical damage. Pointing a dramatic finger, Julian warns the team to stay on guard, prompting a panicked reaction from Jae-ha as he realizes the book still has 2 more curses up its sleeve. The demonic rulebook spreads its pages wide, floating high above the helipad as it mockingly wonders how many of the remaining curses the great majesty can possibly survive. Its giant crimson eye glares down, coldly admitting that if Joo-hyun somehow manages to stop all 4, this worldline will indeed be spared from collapse. The parallel majesty stands quietly in the background, his face dark as he listens to the mention of a worldline's collapse, his mind flashing back to his own lost home. The book shrieks with delight, announcing the immediate activation of the 3rd curse, the Curse of the Nile, initiating the blockade of records. Outside a quiet bookstore, the air begins to shimmer with a strange, destructive energy as the stone towers glow. Inside, the printed text on the covers of the books, including Joo-hyun's own published autobiography, begins to rapidly fade and dissolve into blank spaces. The written letters on the signs and pages literally peel away, disintegrating into thin air. Inside an office, a worker screams in confusion as the ink on his documents and the mapped lines on his globe completely vanish, leaving nothing but blank paper. A glowing system message reveals the horrifying nature of the Curse of the Nile. It completely erases all records, histories, and memories, deleting the birth records of relics to make it impossible for humans to remember how to use them. Suddenly, Jae-ha clutches his head, letting out a confused groan as his eyes go wide with a sudden blank emptiness. Ilya and Jae-ha look around in a complete daze, their faces turning pale as they realize they can no longer remember their own names or how to use their artifacts. Within seconds, the mental regression hits them fully. Ilya blankly picks his nose with a vacant expression, while Jae-ha tries to chew on his metal earring. It is safe to say they have both devolved into very confused toddlers. Jo-hyun and the parallel majesty stand side by side, completely unaffected. The traveler notes that only those holding the title of majesty are immune to the memory wipe, as a true king is defined as one who always remembers. Looking at the burning city, the traveler explains that the gods of the four civilizations are using the rulebook to systematically dismantle humanity's minds, forcing them to destroy themselves. His face hardens as he whispers that his own world was ruined in this exact agonizing order, watching his loved ones lose their minds before the end. The demonic rulebook lets out a smug, self-satisfied purr, boasting that the civilization's design for human extinction is absolutely flawless. But instead of despairing, a sharp, confident smirk spreads across Joo-hyun's face as he notes that he finally understands the pattern behind these curses. He analyzes the sequence. The first curse of Babel represented Babylonia and Mesopotamian mythology. The second curse of Vishvakarma directly represented Indian mythology. He summons his glowing silver blade, pointing out that since these curses are tied directly to the four major civilizations, this third curse of the Nile is clearly Egyptian. With a fierce, determined glare, Joo-hyun deduces that the mastermind behind this memory blockade must be the hidden chief of the Egyptian pantheon, the sun god, Ra. Holding Isis's poisonous fang, the ultimate anti-sun weapon, Joo-hyun sprints toward the edge of the roof, ready to shatter the golden tower, representing Ra's authority. Seeing the deadly anti-sun dagger, the singular eye of the demonic rulebook stretches wide in absolute horror, shrieking that Joo-hyun is blatantly cheating. Leaping high into the air, Joo-hyun laughs wildly, shouting back that there are no rules in an all-out war for survival. He unleashes a massive, blinding flurry of silver slashes, targeting the glowing weak points of the golden Egyptian tower. With a final, powerful strike, he drives the poisonous fang directly into the center of the structure, unleashing a massive explosion of light. The massive golden tower begins to violently crack and crumble, releasing a torrent of glowing red hieroglyphics into the sky as it collapses. A triumphant red interface materializes, confirming the curse of the Nile has been neutralized, Ra's true name has been severely damaged, and the record blockade is officially lifted. Joo-hyun lands back on the rooftop as the glowing letters rain down over the city, slowly returning to the minds of the citizens. Across the metropolis, the faded text on the books, documents, and signs begins to rapidly reappear, restoring the lost history of the world. Jae-ha shakes his head, his eyes lighting up with sudden intelligence as he happily looks at his restoration brush, laughing that he finally remembers how to use his powers. Julian immediately grabs Jae-ha by the collar, furiously screaming at him for acting like a drooling child just moments ago, while the parallel majesty watches the chaotic team dynamic in quiet amusement. Standing at the edge of the roof, the parallel majesty lets out a quiet sigh, his trench coat blowing in the wind as he watches the golden letters fade. He turns his head slightly, his gaze landing on Joo-hyun as he whispers his name with a newfound deep sense of respect. Holding his dagger with an incredibly confident, relaxed posture, Joo-hyun stands firm as glowing red ancient characters flicker and dissolve all around him. Julian and Seola look around in shock, realizing that their stolen memories are finally rushing back. Across the shattered city skyline, the red fragments of the memory curse scatter into the wind. The heavy, suffocating fog that threatened to erase humanity's past is finally lifting, leaving cracked buildings and a quiet, tense atmosphere in its wake. Joo-hyun closes his eyes and takes a slow, deep breath. He is clearing his lungs and gathering his focus, preparing himself for the next wave of whatever the gods are about to throw at him. Looking up at a massive skyscraper towering into the dark crimson sky, Joo-hyun extends his hands and shouts with absolute authority, calling his trusty golden relic back to his side. With a blinding flash of golden energy, a blazing streak of light tears across the roof. It is the triple S rank treasure, the heavenly rope, practically vibrating with excitement as it rushes back to its master. Joo-hyun catches the rope, letting it coil playfully around his hands. The relic is practically weeping with relief, complaining that some weird, suffocating pressure had kept it completely locked down and unable to move. Joo-hyun drops to one knee, looking thoughtfully at the rope. He realizes that because the relic was born from ancient folklore, it was hit hard by the rulebook's curse. Behind him, the parallel majesty watches with a mixture of disbelief and quiet respect, noting that he has never seen anyone bypass a world-ending disaster so easily. Joo-hyun looks back over his shoulder, a cocky, self-assured smirk spreading across his face as he asks the alternate universe ruler if he is impressed yet. But the parallel majesty doesn't smile back. His face is tense as he stares at Juhyun, utterly baffled by how these insignificant humans are still standing after losing their language, their tools, and their history. Suddenly, a massive dark shadow looms over them. The singular glowing red eye of the demonic rulebook shifts focus, admitting that this world's majesty is genuinely impressive. No wonder the higher-ups wanted to recruit him. The book's pointed tail twitches in the air, casting a long, ominous shadow over the rooftop as it prepares its next move. Hovering high above the city, the black book spreads its pages wide over a massive, glowing red magic circle. It declares that since humanity still dares to hold on to hope, it is going to crush that hope once and for all. A glowing crimson interface materializes, announcing the activation of the fourth and final curse, the Curse of Fuxi, a catastrophic spell designed to negate all hope and completely halt human evolution. A traditional ink painting of Fuxi appears in the sky. To give you some brief mythological context, Fuxi is an ancient Chinese deity who gifted humanity the Bagua and writing to help them foresee the future. Johyun looks up, his eyes narrowing as he realizes the cruel irony of the curse. The god who once helped humanity see the future is now using that same power to completely block their future, plunging them into total despair. Juhyun shrugs it off, casually remarking that the name sounds incredibly fancy, but feels a bit too abstract compared to the other curses. But the parallel majesty quickly cuts him off, his face pale as he warns him that this is actually the deadliest one. The alternate ruler points down at the wrecked cars and sparking wires on the street below. The moment time unfreezes, the lack of communication and broken tools will throw the entire world into instantaneous, absolute chaos. He turns his sharp gaze back to Juhyun, asking him what he thinks is the only source of hope left in a world where only relics can be used to survive. Juhyun stands in silence, his back to the alternate majesty. The truth is simple and heavy. Juhyun himself is that hope, because without a majesty, normal humans can't even activate relics to protect themselves. High above, the red eye of the demonic rulebook narrows in sadistic delight, confirming that the alternate ruler hit the nail right on the head. The dark clouds thicken as massive, fleshy red spires erupt from the buildings. The book mocks them, declaring that if the majesty dies, this helpless world will have absolutely nothing left to save it. A colossal, terrifying claw made of swirling black and red energy stretches down from the heavens, aiming directly at the rooftop. The book screams that it is going to eliminate the protagonist of hope. Juhyun grits his teeth, snapping back at the floating book, but suddenly his eyes widen in shock. Crackling blue static wraps around Juhyun's leg, paralyzing him instantly. A systemic alert flashes, declaring that the apocalyptic narrative has begun. The book is actively extracting the Majesty's heart to seal humanity's extinction. Jae-ha screams out in pure terror, watching his captain freeze. The massive, monstrous claw of the book crashes down, demanding that Juhyun hand over his heart without a fight. But the heavenly rope isn't about to let its master die. It whips through the air with lightning speed, wrapping around a heavy gas canister on the roof. With a powerful swing, the rope hurls the canister directly into the monster's face. The tank detonates in a massive, fiery explosion, tearing the fleshy claw to pieces. The book coughs and sputters through the thick smoke, completely caught off guard by the sudden counterattack. Out of the smoke steps June, the spirit of Majesty's cradle, her blonde hair glowing with fiery energy as she vows to protect her master. Behind her, the rest of the crew is hyperventilating, realizing they almost just met their maker. The book quickly recovers, its jagged cover twitching in sheer annoyance at these stubborn pests. Deciding to stop playing games, the book unleashes a swarm of massive, writhing black tentacles, lashing out at the crew with blinding speed. The tentacles tear through the air like organic spears, targeting Juhyun while he is still vulnerable. It happens in a split second. Juhyun's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as the sharp, dark tendrils strike him directly through the chest, spraying a violent arc of blood across the rooftop. Seola and Julian scream in absolute horror, their faces pale and twisted with despair as they watch their leader get struck down. Juhyun gasps for air, a thick trail of blood spilling from his lips as the heavy, cold tentacle pins him in place. With a brutal, fluid motion, the tentacle rips backward, tossing Juhyun's limp body across the roof like a rag doll as blood splatters onto the concrete. The book lets out a cold, satisfied chuckle, watching a brilliant light gather at the tip of its tendrils. Floating in the center of the dark mass is a glowing, jagged red crystal wrapped in ancient magical seals. It is the Majesty's heart, the very core of this entire world line. The crew gathers around Juhyun's unmoving body, completely shattered. The book floats above them, sighing with relief that it won't have to deal with Juhyun's annoying tricks anymore. June drops to her knees beside Juhyun, tears streaming down her face as she shakes him, desperately begging him to open his eyes and wake up. Juhyun lies there, his eyes dull and glassy as a trickle of blood runs down his chin. Julian frantically shouts for someone to bring Chloe and find a healing relic before it is too late. The book flutters its pages mockingly, asking the grieving crew if they seriously think they have any chance of protecting this doomed world line without their majesty. It laughs, telling them that this is only the beginning. From now on, horrific trials will periodically rain down on their world until there is nothing left. The crew can only glare back in helpless, burning rage. But June's grief quickly twists into something terrifying. Her eyes flash with absolute fury, and she lets out a gut-wrenching scream, swearing that she will never forgive the book for what it did. The book tries to casually explain that it is basically the game master here, but before it can finish, June's glowing golden rope wraps around it with a violent, crushing grip. With a deafening roar of raw energy, June slams the book repeatedly into the concrete rooftop, shattering the stone and causing massive shockwaves that shake the entire skyscraper. The book is completely terrified now. Its pages are torn and bent as it frantically begs June to calm down, stammering that it will give them a special perk if they stop even one of the disasters. June has basically gone full debt collector mode. But June is completely deaf to its pleas. She slams it down again and again, leaving massive craters in the roof as the book screams in agony. Barely holding itself together, the book quickly bargains, offering them 3 massive perks in total for surviving the first 3 disasters. June doesn't care. She unleashes another explosive barrage of golden energy. In a desperate bid to survive, the book shrieks that it will completely remove the blue tower curse right now. Wrapped in a fading blue protective aura, the battered book grumbles that June is completely impossible to reason with. It declares that it is leaving, claiming they can never hope to keep it trapped here anyway. With a sharp flash of blue light, the book vanishes into thin air, leaving only the remnants of June's golden energy flickering on the empty rooftop. High above the leaning towers of the city, a massive, ominous eye formed of swirling red clouds blinks, watching the chaotic aftermath of the battle. Chloe finally bursts onto the roof, catching her breath and looking around frantically for the casualty, shouting to find out who needs the healing relic. But she stops dead in her tracks. The heavy silence on the roof speaks volumes. Julian stands frozen, Seola covers her mouth in horror, and June looks down at Juhyun's unmoving body with hollow eyes. Suddenly, a sharp crackle of blue lightning splits the air behind them. A dark portal tears open, and a voice casually demands to know what the hell they think they are doing. The crew turns around, their jaws dropping. Stepping out of the portal, looking completely fine and casually dusting off his jacket, is Seo Juhyun himself. The crew is entirely dumbfounded. Julian stammers, pointing a trembling finger, wondering if they are looking at a ghost, while Ilya simply stares in quiet disbelief. Chloe quickly drops to her knees beside the bloodied corpse on the ground. She wipes away the face, only for the physical appearance to dissolve, revealing that the person lying in the pool of blood isn't Juhyun at all. The illusion fades completely, revealing the pale, unconscious face of Yoo Jae-ha, a thick trail of blood running from his mouth. Juhyun's eyes flash with murderous rage. He storms over to the parallel majesty, grabbing him violently by his collar and demanding to know why he put a hand on his subordinate. The alternate ruler doesn't even flinch. He just lets out a smug, irritating smirk, telling Juhyun he should be thanking him for saving his life instead of throwing a tantrum. Juhyun snaps back, pointing toward the sky where the book was, claiming he could have easily handled that annoying bookhead on his own. The alternate ruler rolls his eyes, dryly pointing out that Juhyun was completely paralyzed and couldn't even summon his relics properly when the attack landed. A flashback shows the moment the gas canister exploded on the roof, clouding the entire area in thick black smoke. Under the cover of the blast, a hand had reached out through the smoke, grabbing Juhyun's arm with a tight, iron grip. Juhyun had spun around in shock, realizing it was the alternate majesty who had grabbed him amidst the chaos. Before Juhyun could even complain, the alternate ruler had thrust a glowing ancient relic directly into his chest. In an instant, the relic's power had swapped their physical coordinates, leaving a perfectly fabricated double of Juhyun in his place to take the fatal blow. Back in the present, the alternate ruler explains that if he hadn't pulled Juhyun out of there, Juhyun's actual heart would have been ripped out. Juhyun looks down at the unconscious Jae-ha, his chest tight as he realizes his friend was sacrificed just to save him. The alternate ruler adjusts his glasses, calmly explaining that the rulebook's perception is absolute, meaning he had to make the sacrifice look completely real to trick it. But as Juhyun's anger reaches a boiling point, the alternate majesty quickly adds that there is no need to panic. Jae-ha isn't actually dead yet. The alternate ruler reaches into his pocket and pulls out a standard cup of instant ramen, holding it up casually in front of Juhyun's face. Juhyun's jaw drops, his brain completely short-circuiting as the alternate majesty calmly declares that Jaeha's soul is currently resting inside the cup of noodles. Juhyun's face contorts into pure, unadulterated irritation. A vein pops on his forehead as he yells, demanding to know what kind of ridiculous garbage joke this is supposed to be. But suddenly, a tiny, high-pitched scream of pure agony echoes directly from the plastic cup. The chibi drawing of Jaeha on the label starts moving and crying, screaming at the alternate majesty for stuffing a human being into a cheap instant snack. Johyun stares in utter shock, his fingers trembling as he looks closely at the complaining noodle cup, realizing the voice is indeed Jaeha's. Juhyun lets out a long sigh, a relieved but amused smile returning to his face as he mutters that the endless complaining is definitely classic Jaeha. Juhyun's smile fades slightly, his teeth grinding together as he looks down at the cup, still processing the sheer absurdity of the situation. Suddenly, Juhyun starts shaking the cup furiously, screaming at the alternate majesty for choosing mild flavor instead of spicy, claiming he has absolutely zero taste. Jaeha's soul weeps inside the cup, utterly defeated that they are arguing about noodle flavors while he is trapped in styrofoam. The system interface pops up, confirming that Jaeha has officially been transformed into a double S rank, God-tier consumable relic, Cup Ramen Yu Jaeha, while the poor guy continues to sob on the label. Chloe looks up from the unconscious body, her face serious as she notes that even though Jaeha doesn't have a heart, his body isn't actually decaying. She explains that it is as if his physical body has been completely frozen in time, and Juhyun quietly asks if there is any way they can bring him back to normal. The alternate majesty replies that it is simple, they just have to hunt down the gods and take Jaeha's heart back. He smiles, pointing out that right now is the ultimate chance to launch a massive counterattack, because the primordial deities currently think the majesty of this world is dead. The alternate ruler explains that this is the only world line that hasn't compromised with the gods, making Juhyun's existence incredibly special. A flashback shows a massive wave of golden energy tearing through parallel cities, as the alternate majesty notes he has wandered through countless dying worlds. Another flashback shows Juhyun shattering the ancient monuments and breaking the divine curses of Ra and Vishvakarma with absolute brute force. The alternate majesty's eyes gleam behind his glasses as he looks at Juhyun, fully believing that Juhyun is the only one capable of conquering the 4 major civilizational pantheons and ending this endless nightmare. He extends his hand toward Juhyun, his voice firm and filled with resolve as he invites the captain to join him on a mission to strike the gods down. The alternate majesty stands firm, his hand extended as he repeats that Juhyun is the only hope left to bring the relics of the 4 major civilizations to their knees. Juhyun stands quietly, clutching the cup ramen Jaeha. The weight of the world is resting on his shoulders, but his face remains completely unreadable. The alternate majesty leans in, adding the final most crucial piece of bait. By crushing the gods, they can reclaim Jaeha's heart, and more importantly, Juhyun can finally get his daughter back. Juhyun's eye twitches, his pupils narrowing to sharp points. He turns his cold, intense gaze toward the alternate ruler, who confirms that he knows the gods took Juhyun's child, and this is the only way to tear her back from their realm. A painful memory flashes in Juhyun's mind, his beautiful wife Irene, weeping bitterly in his arms after their baby was magically stolen directly from her womb. The raw, agonizing pain of that night still burns fresh in his soul. Juhyun stands in silence, his eyes shadowed by his wild dark hair. The burning, protective rage of a father is quiet, but it is incredibly deadly. He slowly asks where those divine bastards are currently hiding. The alternate majesty looks out over the gray city, revealing that they are camped inside Amaterasu's pocket dimension. Juhyun looks puzzled, repeating the name, and the alternate ruler explains that the Japanese sun goddess successfully hid herself to escape the global curse of relicization. Juhyun touches his golden majesty ring, his face hardening as he listens to how the deities of the major civilizations are using her hidden space as their main base of operations. An ancient illustration of Amaterasu appears, the sun goddess who once grew furious at her brother Susanu's rampage and hid herself deep inside a dark cave, plunging the world into shadows. The old scroll painting shows the other gods throwing a massive, lively feast outside the cave, dancing in the dark to lure her back into the light. Juhyun realizes that because she was the ultimate master of hiding, she was able to completely dodge the system's forced relic transformation. A hazy, ethereal image of the primordial gods appears. The alternate majesty explains that from their safe haven, they are sending the demonic rulebook across different timelines to force all other majesties into total submission. A dark recollection shows the false Juhyun lying dead on the roof while June weeps. Juhyun grumbles, wondering why these divine bastards are so obsessed with collecting the hearts of majesties in the first place. The alternate ruler looks surprised, realizing he hasn't explained the cosmic rules yet. He turns to Juhyun, his face serious. A glowing crimson crystal appears on screen. He explains that the moment someone claims the title of majesty, their heart is no longer human, it becomes the core axis, the literal anchor of that entire world line. A visual of glowing spectral hands gathering multiple crimson hearts appears. The gods are collecting these anchors to accumulate enough cosmic power to completely unravel the curse of relicization. A shattering pane of glass shows a figure holding a golden hammer. If they succeed, they will erase the absolute law that forces all myths to exist as relics, allowing them to rewrite the entire fabric of reality however they see fit. Juhyun's eyes widen slightly in surprise, questioning if rewriting the absolute laws of existence is even physically possible. The alternate ruler looks down, explaining that while a single majesty can only control the relic rules of his own specific world, gathering multiple hearts grants them the collective authority to rewrite the laws of the entire multiverse. Juhyun looks down at the noodle cup in his hand, a thin smirk returning to his face as he mutters that he now has plenty of reasons to go after them, even if it is just to save his idiot restorer. Jae-ha lets out a tiny, tearful squeak of gratitude. Suddenly, Juhyun's face contorts into a terrifying, demonic grin, a brilliant blue light erupting from his left eye as he declares they are going to storm their hideout and tear them to absolute shreds. The alternate majesty smiles widely, loving the enthusiasm, and offers to use his dimensional travel relic to leave immediately since he can easily track the rulebook's energy. Juhyun walks slowly to the edge of the roof, looking out over the silent frozen city. He notes that while the plan is great, he has some massive garbage to clean up in his own world first. He points down at the cracked roads and crashed vehicles. The moment time unfreezes, every single human-made machine will break down, and the language barrier will turn the streets into a chaotic, screaming nightmare. Seola and Julian nod in agreement, suggesting they use flight relics to safely guide the stranded planes out of the sky before unfreezing time, though they will be incredibly lucky if they can manage it in time. Ilya steps forward, holding up a small glowing green stone, suggesting they can replicate and distribute this interpretation relic to temporarily bypass the language barrier. But Julian sighs, looking at the cup of noodles, dryly asking who on earth is going to handle mass replication on that scale besides their resident genius restorer, who is currently a snack. Juhyun slowly turns his gaze toward the alternate majesty, a devious, sharp smile spreading across his face as he suggests that they have another highly capable majesty standing right here. Suddenly, a massive, deafening fanfare of golden trumpets echoes through the sky, shattering the silence of the frozen world. Ilya and Seola spin around, their eyes wide with alarm as Seola shouts, pointing toward a blinding light expanding in the heavens. In the center of the sky, a massive red starburst of energy erupts, flanked by several small, glowing golden trumpets with angelic wings. Juhyun shields his eyes from the glare as a colossal, glowing pink stone archway, resembling the Arc de Triomphe, materializes in the clouds. A systemic notification blares, declaring that because this world has lost its majesty, the conditions for a foreign invasion have been officially met. The massive, glowing pink archway hovers over the skyscrapers. A system window identifies it as the double S rank, God-tier Arch of Victory Triumph, a highly dangerous invasion-type relic that grows stronger with every world it conquers. The alternate ruler looks down at Jae-ha's unconscious double, explaining that when a world line is registered as having lost its majesty, other power-hungry majesties will immediately invade to plunder its defenseless relics. He scowls, realizing the demonic rulebook must have spread the word of Juhyun's death instantly, calling the invaders incredibly fast, annoying pests. But Juhyun just lets out a cold laugh. He extends his hand, summoning Gungnir, the legendary glowing silver spear of Odin. With a massive roar, a giant metallic blue dragon-like spear crashes down from the sky, aiming directly at the skyscraper to crush the incoming portal. But the moment the spear makes contact, it collides with a massive glowing red barrier, generating a violent explosion of sparks. Juhyun gasps in surprise as a system alert pops up, announcing that the strike was completely blocked by a foreign majesty's passive attribute. Walking slowly out of the glowing red portal is a tall, imposing silhouette. A loud, echoing voice tests the air, mockingly declaring an official conquest. Stepping fully into the light is a wild-looking man with long, vibrant red hair, a manic grin, and a red fur-lined coat. He steps down from the archway as if he already owns the place. He lets out a loud, terrifying laugh, introducing himself as Majesty Mars O'Connell, declaring that this world now belongs entirely to him. Mars swipes through a glowing red interface, reviewing the active curses on this world line, humming in amusement when he notices they have already resolved 2 of them. He looks down at the frozen city below, skiing in annoyance when he notices someone had stopped the flow of time. he decides he is going to have to undo that little trick first. A massive purple notification fills the screen, announcing that an invading majesty has activated a world-class perk, instantly dispelling all status ailments across the entire planet. Instantly, the frozen world snaps back to life. A flock of seagulls in the sky flaps their wings, suddenly falling back into motion as feathers drift through the air. On the streets below, a schoolgirl screams in terror as a heavy concrete pillar suddenly crumbles and crashes down right in front of her. Massive explosions rock the streets as cars collide and building facades collapse. People run for their lives, but their screams of warning come out as completely garbled, incomprehensible symbols due to the active Babel curse. On the roof, Julian panics, shouting that time is moving again and they have to act immediately to stop the invader. Julian summons his white horse Relic, jumping onto its back and riding into the sky, desperately shouting that the language barrier is going to cause horrific plane crashes all over the globe. Mars O'Connell looks down from his floating archway, his manic red eyes widening as he spots Julian riding toward him. He grabs his own neck, letting out a sadistic wide-mouthed laugh, declaring that mass casualties are actually perfect because once the humans die, their contracts with their bound relics will break, allowing him to easily plunder everything. Julian grits his teeth, pulling tight on his horse's reins, muttering that the guy is completely insane. Down on the roof, Ju Hyun stares cold-eyed, calling the invader absolute unredeemable trash. Suddenly, June and her counterpart float down beside Ju Hyun, pointing out that because Ju Hyun survived the previous curses, the rulebook has left some massive high-tier perks for him as well. The small, leather-bound demonic rulebook floats in the air, glowing with a soft golden light. Ju Hyun catches the mini-book, flipping through its pages with a raised eyebrow, noting that it is a triple S rank item. The pages glow with deep blue cosmic energy. The system lists the incredible perks. Perk 1, Absolute Decree, which allows a single absolute wish for victory, and Perk 2, Future Regression, allowing them to save and load points in time. Perk 3 allows them to directly alter one rule of the current world line. Ju Hyun's eyes light up, a devious, sharp smile returning to his face as he realizes these perks are absolutely insane if used correctly. Meanwhile, the streets below are in complete chaos. People are running frantically, screaming in garbled symbols as heavy debris rains down from the sky. Mars stands before his massive triumphal arch, a wild, glowing golden ring on his finger as he raises his hand, declaring that the great relic collection has officially begun. A massive, pulsing red shockwave of brainwashing energy erupts from the archway, washing over the entire city. The red light hits the citizens below. Their eyes glow with a blank, crimson light as Mars's voice echoes in their minds, declaring that they are now his slaves and must search for relics to present to him. The brainwashed citizens raise their hands to the sky, screaming in incomprehensible gibberish as they mindlessly prepare to offer their precious relics to their new emperor. On the roof, Ju Hyun grits his teeth, holding onto the concrete ledge as he watches the horrific display, realizing this is the terrifying power of the triumphal arch relic. Seola runs up, her face pale as she shouts that the planes in the sky have started moving, but they have absolutely no way to communicate with the control towers because of the language barrier. Ju Hyun calculates the trajectory in his head, noting that the flight paths are crossing and the first catastrophic mid-air collision is expected to happen in exactly 397 seconds. He curses, realizing they have to deal with this emergency first. He spins around, pointing his finger directly at the sophisticated alternate majesty, commanding him to create a relic immediately. The alternate ruler looks completely baffled, blinking behind his glasses as he asks if Ju Hyun is seriously demanding him to just manifest a relic out of thin air. Ju Hyun smiles coldly, stating he knows damn well the guy can do it. The system window pops up, revealing the alternate Jaeha's unique majesty attribute, relic creation. Ju Hyun smugly notes that his own relics are pretty smart and have already told him exactly what the alternate ruler's specialty is. A flashback shows the creepy guillotine arena as Ju Hyun points out that the alternate majesty was the one who perfectly replicated the 3 god-tier Egyptian relics and the execution stage in the first place. Another flashback shows Ju Hyun getting impaled as he notes that the alternate ruler was also able to instantly recreate Jaeha's heart into a majesty's heart to fool the rulebook. With that level of power, creating a new relic should be a walk in the park. Ju Hyun steps closer, his voice dripping with playful menace as he points out that the alternate majesty came to his world, caused a massive mess, and turned his valuable subordinate into a cup of instant noodles, so he has a massive responsibility to fix this. Before the alternate ruler can even argue, a glowing golden stream of energy wraps tightly around his wrists, locking him in place. Ju-hyun grins, telling him he cannot run away. The alternate majesty sighs, holding up his bound hands, explaining that while he has the power, he cannot just manifest any random object, he can only create relics based on specific, structured stories that he thoroughly knows. Ju-hyun taps his temple with a devious, confident smirk, telling him not to worry about that for even a single second. An old parchment illustration appears, depicting a massive towering stone structure spiraling into the clouds as joyful ancient citizens gather around it. Ju-hyun recites the biblical passage of Genesis chapter 11 verse 1, the beginning of the Tower of Babel, when the entire world still spoke one single, unified language. Ju-hyun looks directly at the alternate majesty, his eyes gleaming with terrifying brilliance and his signature, cocky grin spreading wide across his face as he commands him to create a relic using that exact passage. They are going to use the origin of the Tower of Babel to completely shatter the language curse. Ju-hyun wears a confident, dangerous smirk, explaining that they are going to ignore the tragic ending and focus entirely on the first half of the story. By crafting a custom relic based solely on that brief moment of perfect unity, they will completely reverse the language curse. The parallel majesty adjusts his glasses, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his face as he admits that Ju-hyun is one incredibly sly bastard, but the plan itself is completely flawless. He presses his finger directly onto the concrete, channeling his unique majesty energy to manifest the custom relic they just designed. Golden light bursts from the rooftop, reflecting in Ju-hyun's intense, focused gaze as the creation process begins. With a heavy rumble, a massive slab of ancient stone slowly pushes its way up through the concrete floor of the skyscraper. The golden light solidifies, revealing a colossal glowing stone tablet carved with radiant ancient script, the Genesis chapter 11 tablet, humming with the power of a unified world. The alternate ruler stands up, dusting off his coat, but he quickly warns Ju-hyun that because this is a highly specific religious relic directly from the Bible, they will need someone with massive spiritual compatibility to actually activate it. Ju-hyun and the alternate majesty slowly turn their heads, their eyes locking onto Ilya, who immediately looks incredibly uncomfortable. Ju-hyun points out that Ilya literally used to be a priest in a past life, meaning his connection to the Bible is probably the strongest out of everyone present. Ilya's cool demeanor completely breaks. He panics, yelling at them that his priesthood was a lifetime ago and he is strictly a demon specialist now. Seola chuckles in the background, agreeing that his demonic specialties probably make him a terrible match for holy relics. Ju-hyun shrugs, confidently stating that he doesn't need compatibility when he can just force the relic to submit with his own raw dominance. Ju-hyun's eyes flash with a manic, competitive fire. He extends his hand toward the stone, laughing that those who obsess over awakening have no idea how true power works. He slams his palm directly onto the stone. A blinding, golden explosion of raw energy erupts from the tablet, forcing the alternate majesty to shield his eyes from the sheer pressure. The alternate ruler is completely stunned, watching in absolute disbelief as Ju-hyun bends the holy relic to his will through brute force alone. A systemic notification flashes across the screen, confirming the activation of the God-tier Genesis chapter 11 tablet, unifying the voices of every single living creature on the planet. A colossal pillar of golden light shoots straight into the heavens from the top of the skyscraper, scattering the dark clouds and spreading a warm, unifying wave across the entire city. On the streets below, two panicked citizens who were screaming at each other in incomprehensible gibberish suddenly freeze, the red glow fading from their eyes. They look around in utter confusion, realizing they can suddenly understand each other perfectly. Even a small white dog on a leash looks up, complaining aloud that it is absolutely terrified. It is a tough day when even the family pet can clearly articulate its anxiety. Two heavily armed tactical officers look at each other in surprise, realizing their communication channels are suddenly clear, and they can coordinate their movements again. On the roof, the system confirms the global linguistic restructure. Ju-hyun catches his breath, admitting it took a lot of juice, while Jaeha's soul bounces happily inside the noodle cup, cheering for his monstrously powerful master. Chloe runs up, holding her headset, her face filled with relief as she reports that all planes are successfully avoiding collisions and global communications are fully restored. Below them, the chaotic panic on the streets slowly resolves as police officers and citizens finally communicate, guiding everyone to nearby emergency shelters. High above, Mars O'Connell is losing his mind. He screams in rage, clutching his head as he realizes his Conqueror relic is suddenly failing to dominate the populace. On the streets, people look up at the loud rumbling, casually wondering if it is just thunder and if they should grab an umbrella, completely ignoring Mars's demands. Ju-hyun looks up at the floating pink archway, calmly stating that history is always written by the victors, and Mars's relic is the perfect ugly example of that. Mars grinds his teeth, glaring down at Juhyun as he growls that conquest requires division, a strict hierarchy of rulers and those who are ruled. Juhyun lets out a mocking laugh, clashing his fist as he explains that their new biblical tablet completely erases that division. The glowing ancient script on the stone tablet flares brightly. By making every creature speak the exact same language, the very concept of hierarchy is neutralized. On the streets, the citizens shout together in unison, declaring their equality and completely breaking free from Mars's mind control aura. Mars gasps as the pink, conquering energy of the triumphal arch begins to crack and shatter, the power slipping directly out of his hands. He watches in absolute horror as deep, glowing fractures spread across the massive stone structure of his prized invasion relic. Juhyun looks at him with a predatory, cold smirk, telling Mars that without the gap between master and servant, his grand conqueror relic is nothing but a useless piece of garbage. Mars's face contorts with pure, animalistic fury. He growls that neutralizing a single relic doesn't mean this war is over. With a savage motion, Mars draws a sharp blade and slashes his own hand, letting blood pour freely as he prepares a desperate, dark summon. A thick, violent geyser of crimson blood shoots up from his palm, swirling in the air like a demonic vortex. He throws his blood skyward, roaring for his trans-dimensional allies to step through and join the slaughter. Massive, fleshy red gateways tear open across the sky, linking their world to other coordinates. Out of the blood-red portal steps a bizarre small figure wearing a traditional straw hat, casually greeting Mars and asking if this is their new playground. The parallel majesty's face turns pale. He gasps, realizing Mars has just bypassed the barriers to summon high-tier mercenaries from entirely different world lines. Mars lets out a manic, wide-mouthed laugh, mocking Juhyun. He points out that since they all share a single language now, his foreign allies can coordinate with him perfectly, making their invasion even easier. The alternate ruler is entirely dumbfounded, staring at the sky as he realizes the horrifying side effect of their linguistic unification. He looks back at the massive stone tablet, muttering in disbelief, wondering how a single newly crafted relic could possibly reach across multiple world lines. He looks down at his hands, sweating slightly as he realizes that out of all the triple S ranked treasures he has ever crafted, none have ever possessed this level of multidimensional influence. Mars laughs hysterically, reaching into the red sky as a glowing, blood-red ancient helmet materializes in his hand. He hurls the helmet directly at Juhyun. The crimson armor clamps onto Juhyun's head, crackling with violent energy. Before the crew can react, identical glowing red helmet projections materialize on the heads of Julian, Seola, and Ilya. June's counterpart screams in panic, identifying the relic as Ares' helmet, a cursed artifact of war that completely blinds the wearer to the concept of allies. Juhyun clutches his head, his eyes turning bloodshot as the violent, corrupting aura of the Greek god of war forces him to perceive every single living soul around him as a mortal enemy. Julian stands frozen, his posture stiffening as the red energy completely takes over his mind. Within seconds, the crew transforms into mindless, feral beasts. Seola and Ilya growl, their faces twisting with pure hatred as they glare at Julian. Julian draws a weapon, threatening to slaughter them, while Jaeha's noodle cup bounces frantically on the concrete, crying for them to snap out of this madness. But the curse is too strong. Seola and Ilya lunge at the floating noodle cup, their faces feral as they scream that they are going to boil him alive and eat him. Apparently, a crisis makes everyone crave late-night convenience food. The noodle cup bounces frantically through the air, barely dodging their grasping claws, before falling straight into the alternate majesty's hands. The alternate ruler catches the cup, sweating heavily as he clutches his own head, admitting that he is barely holding on to his sanity under the helmet's intense pressure. Behind him, the shadowy, red-eyed silhouettes of Julian and the others slowly creep forward, demanding that he hand over the noodle cup. The alternate majesty grits his teeth, staring in shock as the violent aura continues to intensify. Below the roof, the curse spreads like wildfire. Even ordinary police officers and security guards are brutally beating each other with batons, completely consumed by mindless rage. Mars O'Connell watches the chaotic self-destruction from his archway, laughing hysterically at the pathetic sight, telling them to tear each other to pieces. June's counterpart rushes to Juhyun's side, realizing that since Mars stripped away all ranks and hierarchies, they are technically in an equalized state. Juhyun's eye flashes red through the helmet, his teeth bared in a terrifying grin as he realizes this chaotic equality actually works entirely in his favor. June's counterpart tries to channel her energy to clear his mind, realizing she needs to act fast before he completely loses himself to the war god's madness. A glowing purple prompt appears in Juhyun's blurred vision, asking if he wants to activate the third SSS rank perk, Setting Alteration. Juhyun clutches his helmet, a sudden spark of absolute clarity returning to his eyes as he reads the notification. The system confirms the perk's function, allowing him to modify one absolute rule of the current world line. Juhyun's eyes focus, a cold, calculated look replacing the feral rage. He whispers that he almost forgot about the rulebook's massive compensation. He slowly lowers his hands from his head, clenching his fist as the golden majesty ring on his finger flares with brilliant energy. With a powerful roar, Juhyun raises his glowing fist high into the air, completely shattering the mental hold of Ares' curse through sheer willpower. Looking up at the terrified face of Mars O'Connell, Juhyun smiles like a devil, announcing that he is going to rewrite the rules of this game right now. A massive, blinding cross of multicolored cosmic energy erupts from Juhyun's fist, tearing through the sky and restructuring the very laws of the world line. The blinding cross of cosmic light expands over the skyscrapers, completely rewriting the reality of the battlefield as the setting alteration takes hold. Mars O'Connell is thrown backward by the sheer shockwave, coughing as he desperately tries to shield his face from the crushing energy. Juhyun stands firm, his voice booming with absolute authority as he declares the new rule, under the presence of any chief god-tier relic. Colossal bolts of blue lightning split the sky, roaring with the fury of a chief deity as the clouds twist into a massive storm. The system finalizes the rule change. All lower-tier relics are instantly and completely neutralized. A massive lightning strike crashes directly into Ares' helmet, causing it to scream in agony. Mars looks up in sheer horror, his jaw dropping as he watches his high-tier Greek war relic get violently blasted to pieces by the heavenly thunder. On the roof, the red helmet projections on the crew's heads shatter into harmless dust, freeing them from the violent illusion. Julian and Seola snap back to normal, looking at their hands in utter confusion, wondering what kind of madness they were just committing. To understand the logic behind this rule rewrite, we have to look at Ares' standing in Greek mythology. While Ares is indeed the god of war, he was constantly overshadowed and pushed around by his father Zeus. The ancient scroll shows the towering figure of Zeus looming over the smaller war god. In the divine hierarchy of Greece, Ares is completely subordinate to the king of the gods. Juhyun stands bathed in crackling blue electricity, holding a massive glowing lightning bolt, the double S rank, chief god tier Zeus's spear. He laughs, pointing out that Mars brought a junior executive's toy to a CEO's fight. Mars's face twists with pure, unadulterated terror. He stammers, realizing that not only does Juhyun possess a chief god-tier relic, but he also wielded a rulebook perk. Juhyun looks at him with a predatory, freezing smirk, confirming that Mars is looking at the actual, living majesty of this world. Terrified, Mars screams for his transdimensional mercenaries to capture Juhyun immediately, realizing they are dealing with a monster. A systemic warning flashes in the sky. Mars's invasion portal coordinates are violently recalibrating, detecting Juhyun's active majesty heart and initiating an immediate transdimensional retrieval. Dozens of foreign mercenaries dive down from the portals like falling stars. Juhyun looks up, calmly telling his crew to fall back and prepare to counter. The alternate majesty is holding Jaeha's noodle cup when suddenly, thick clouds of hot yellow steam begin to erupt from the styrofoam container. The chibi Jaeha on the label panics, screaming that he's burning up and wondering if someone poured boiling water on him. The massive cloud of yellow steam expands rapidly, completely shrouding the entire rooftop in a thick, opaque fog. The heavy yellow mist spreads across the city blocks, completely blocking the invading portal's targeting systems. High above, Mars's mercenaries fly blindly through the mist, frustrated that they have completely lost the Majesty's coordinates. A system notification pops up. Jaeha's innate survival instinct has activated, triggering a special stealth defense called Emergency Foods Protection. It is good to know that even as a cup of noodles, Jaeha is still finding ways to be incredibly useful. Juhyun chuckles, teasing the crying cup ramen that he is genuinely starting to act like a useful relic. Jaeha's soul continues to weep, insisting he is still a human. Juhyun's eyes narrow, a dark, murderous look returning to his face as he clutches the noodle cup, whispering that it is time to strike the invader where it hurts. Hidden within the thick yellow steam, Juhyun draws a small, glowing purple blade, his voice cold as he questions how a cheap thief dared to invade his home. Above the fog, Julian and the alternate majesty unleash a diversionary blast of energy to keep the mercenaries distracted. Mars O'Connell flies through the sky, frantically swinging his fists and screaming for the slippery little rat to stop hiding and face him. He stops, his predatory instincts flaring as he senses a sudden shift in the air behind him. Out of the yellow steam, Juhyun materializes directly behind Mars, diving down with his blade raised high. With a brutal fluid motion, Juhyun drives the sharp purple blade directly into Mars's chest. Juhyun looks at him from inches away, a terrifying, mocking grin on his face as he holds the noodle cup casually over his shoulder. Mars coughs, but he quickly grabs Juhyun's wrist, trying to force the blade out of his chest. Mars grins bloodily, laughing that a tiny, pathetic toothpick of a blade has no hope of bypassing his active high-tier defense relic. But Juhyun's grin only widens. He whispers that this isn't just any ordinary blade. Mars's face turns pale as glowing red letters begin to burn across his chest. A massive purple notification confirms the activation of Isis's Poison Fang, completely deleting Mars O'Connell's true name and shattering his majesty authority. High above, the massive stone archway of the Triumphal Arch violently cracks, the pink light fading as its connection to its master is severed. A glowing helmet projection on Mars's head shatters into a million pieces, his defensive systems completely failing. Mars falls backward, clutching his chest and screaming in agonizing panic as his name, his authority, and his very power are violently erased from his soul. Before he can even process the loss, Ju-hyun delivers a brutal, lightning-infused punch directly to Mars's jaw. The force of the blow sends Mars spinning through the air. Ju-hyun looms over him, coldly stating that a conqueror without a name is nothing but a common thief. Ju-hyun looks down, his blue eye gleaming with absolute malice as he asks what normally happens to a thief when they get caught. He raises Zeus's spear, channeling a colossal amount of crackling blue electricity. He hurls the spear. A massive, deafening pillar of blue lightning crashes down from the heavens, blasting Mars straight through the concrete roof. Mars screams in agony as the lightning tears through his body, blood spraying from his mouth as he is slammed into the building's infrastructure. Ju-hyun descends through the smoke, his face calm and predatory as debris rains down around him. Mars lies in a massive, smoking crater, completely broken and bleeding. Ju-hyun stands over him, muttering that the conqueror was nothing but a pathetic joke. Ju-hyun kneels down, casually digging through Mars's pockets, asking if the thief brought anything actually worth stealing. His fingers brush against a cold, metallic object. Ju-hyun's eyes widen slightly, a smug smile returning to his face. He pulls out a beautiful, golden, metallic sphere. Mars frantically reaches his trembling hand out, begging him not to take it. Ju-hyun ignores his pleas, tossing the golden ball lightly in his hand and smiling coldly. He looks down at the dazed invader, telling him he will be nice and return his toy by using its absolute power directly on its former owner. The golden sphere flares with a brilliant, crushing blue light. Mars grinds his teeth, his face pale as he realizes what Ju-hyun is about to unleash. Ju-hyun tosses the sphere into the air. A massive glowing blue celestial map of the globe expands over the rooftop, casting a suffocating shadow over Mars. The system confirms the activation of the god-tier Atlas's sphere, triggering the forced transfer of the absolute weight of the world onto Mars. Mars tries to raise his hands to push the energy away, but the crushing gravitational force instantly fractures the bones in his fingers. He is violently slammed flat against the concrete, the immense weight crushing his legs and leaving a deep crater beneath him. Ju-hyun looks down at him, his expression completely hollow and devoid of mercy, as he notes that Mars tried to steal an entire world. He steps closer, watching the crushing gravity slowly flatten the invader, coldly telling him he can spend eternity bearing the physical weight of that world on his own shoulders. Blood pours from Mars's mouth, but he lets out a manic, bloody grin, coughing that this is only the beginning and the other majesties will never leave him alone. Ju-hyun simply scoffs, walking away as a massive systemic notification confirms that the invader Mars O'Connell has been successfully repelled. High in the sky, the remaining transdimensional mercenaries panic, shouting that their leader is dead as the massive red portals begin to violently collapse and close. The portal gate shrinks rapidly. The mercenaries scream in terror, completely abandoning the battlefield and fleeing back to their own world lines. Ju-hyun watches them run, waving them goodbye with a smug smile, telling them to run along home unless they want to end up flat like their boss. He extends his hand, shrinking the massive Atlas's sphere back into its harmless, pocket-sized golden ball. Below them, the cheers of the surviving citizens echo through the streets, celebrating the absolute victory of their majesty. Suddenly, a massive, glowing red hologram screen materializes in the sky, broadcasting a replay of the entire battle. Ju-hyun looks up, slightly annoyed, wondering why his fight was being streamed without his permission. The alternate majesty walks up behind him, explaining that Mars officially declared a majesty battle before invading. He explains that during a majesty battle, the rulebook broadcasts the fight to every involved world line because the losing world is automatically converted into a colony of the winner. He prompts Ju-hyun to check his massive spoils of war. Ju-hyun looks down into the smoking crater. In the center of the pool of Mars's blood, a brilliant glowing red light is slowly gathering. The blood burns away, leaving a massive pristine crimson crystal floating in the air, humming with absolute cosmic power. June's counterpart steps forward, her eyes wide with awe, as she confirms that this is Mars O'Connell's majesty heart. Ju-hyun catches the glowing crystal in his palm. He holds the heart of a fallen ruler, a cold, powerful smile returning to his face as he realizes the true scale of the war they are about to wage against the heavens. Jun's counterpart and the alternate majesty watch in absolute silence, completely mesmerized by the intense raw energy radiating from the crystallized heart of a fallen ruler. Jun explains that by absorbing this heart, Ju-hyun will instantly acquire Mars O'Connell's unique majesty ability. Ju-hyun looks up, surprised but highly intrigued by the possibility. The system interface blares, identifying Mars's ability as Conqueror's Authority, a high-tier domination skill, and asks Ju-hyun if he is ready to absorb its power. Ju-hyun lets out a dark, wicked laugh, stating that he absolutely loves the sound of that name, clenching his fist as the crimson crystal begins to crackle. Just then, Julian, Chloe, Seola, and Ilya burst onto the roof, screaming their commander's name in pure panic, completely unaware of what he is about to do. In an instant, a blinding, multicolored explosion of pure cosmic energy erupts from the heart, forcing the entire crew to halt and shield their eyes from the crushing pressure. The crystal shatters into glowing red fragments, dissolving directly into Ju-hyun's hand as a satisfied predatory grin spreads across his face. Ju-hyun feels the new power coursing through his veins, wondering if this Conqueror's Authority is a standard mind control ability similar to the corporate tyrants he has fought before. A system notification pops up, revealing his newly mutated S-rank skill, Fight Amongst Yourselves. The effect forces everyone, superiors and subordinates alike, to perceive each other as conquerors and immediately start fighting one another. Ju-hyun looks at the screen, sweat dropping as he questions why his mind control spell turned into a chaotic battle royale. Jun sighs, explaining that abilities naturally mutate to match the twisted, troublemaking personality of the one absorbing them. Jaeha's noodle cup soul bounces happily on his shoulder, laughing that the chaotic curse fits the commander perfectly since he practically functions as a literal demon to his enemies. Ju-hyun's veins pop on his forehead. He grabs the noodle cup, furiously shouting for someone to boil some water so he can cook this annoying little punk right now as Jaeha screams for mercy. Suddenly, a bright teal portal tears open. The triple S-ranked demonic rulebook floats into view, trembling with absolute shock and rage as it realizes Ju-hyun is still alive. Ju-hyun lets out a mocking laugh, showing off his noodle cup, teasing the book that it was so busy happily stabbing Jaeha's chest that it didn't even realize it pulled out the wrong heart. The book's singular red eye twitches, an angry crossmark popping on its cover. It grumbles that this is incredibly humiliating, but rules are rules, meaning it still has to hand over a victory reward. A purple screen materializes, awarding Ju-hyun the highly chaotic title, Majesty of Chaos. The passive effect drastically increases his presence, ensuring that trouble and aggressive relic attacks will constantly follow him wherever he goes. The book spits a glowing spark of energy at him, cursing his name and wishing he drops dead soon, before vanishing into a sharp flash of blue light. Seola looks incredibly worried about the curse, but Ju-hyun just shrugs, casually stating that if he draws all the attention to himself, it might actually make things much safer for the rest of them. He looks up at the towering skyline, his face turning serious as he declares that now that the immediate threat is resolved, they need to set out immediately to hunt the book down. He looks back at his vanguard, firmly telling them to stay behind. He clutches the noodle cup, stating that he is going to save their daughter and turn Jaeha back to normal alone. Jaeha's chibi face on the noodle cup glows with adorable, tearful gratitude, wishing the commander a safe trip and sending him virtual hearts. But Ju-hyun instantly ruins the touching moment, deadpanning that Jaeha is coming with him, warning that if they run out of food, he is using the noodle cup as emergency rations. Jaeha screams in pure indignation. Ju-hyun turns to the alternate majesty, calmly telling him that he is coming along too to act as their guide across the dimensions. The alternate ruler sighs, accepting his fate. Seola steps forward, her eyes wide with concern as she questions if they can really trust this guy, pointing out that since he has Jaeha's face, he basically looks like a total scammer and a natural-born traitor. Julian nods, his face tense behind his glasses as he begs Ju-hyun to let them tag along, pointing out that the rulebook is far too dangerous for him to face with such a small team. They stand in a circle on the cracked asphalt, arguing back and forth, but Ju-hyun quickly shuts them down, asking who on earth is going to protect their base world line if they all abandon ship. The Parallel Majesty agrees, explaining that other opportunistic invaders could show up at any moment to plunder their defenseless world. He points out that the rulebook will continuously issue sudden global missions, and if they fail to protect the base, they will receive devastating world-ending penalties. Jo-hyun looks at Julian, Ilya, and Seola, telling them their job is incredibly crucial. He commands them to protect this world line and look after Irene while he is gone. Just then, a soft, familiar voice breaks through the tension. Ju-hyun turns around, his eyes softening as he sees Irene standing nearby, looking at him with quiet, painful understanding. He walks over to her, his voice low and gentle as he softly calls her name. acknowledging that this journey is going to be incredibly dangerous. He gently cups her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin as he looks into her beautiful blue eyes, whispering that he still has to go to drag their daughter back home. He pulls her close, a confident, reassuring smile on his face as he tells her not to worry, reminding her that he has never once returned from a hunt empty-handed. He looks down at her, his voice soft but filled with unshakable resolve as he asks if she trusts him. Irene stares up at him, a single glistening tear spilling down her cheek as she gazes into his blue eyes. She buries her face in his chest, wrapping her arms tightly around him, jokingly threatening that if he is lying and doesn't come back, she will find a way to completely bankrupt him. The crew watches the tender moment in quiet, emotional silence. Breaking the embrace, the alternate majesty steps forward, holding a small, smooth green bean in his open palm, casually asking if they are ready to head out. Joo-hyun looks at the tiny seed, completely unimpressed, questioning what a stupid little bean is supposed to do. The alternate ruler explains that despite its looks, this is a highly powerful dimensional travel relic. He tosses the seed onto the asphalt. Instantly, a violent explosion of green energy tears through the road as massive, thick emerald vines erupt from the crater. A colossal magical beanstalk shoots straight into the heavens like a massive green tower, shocking a passing pigeon in mid-flight as it pierces through the clouds. Julian, Ilya, and Seola crane their necks, staring up at the endless green pillar, realizing the travel relic was literally Jack and the Beanstalk. Joo-hyun's face contorts with pure irritation. He grabs the alternate majesty, yelling, demanding to know how they are supposed to climb a giant vertical weed to reach another world. He sighs, turning back to Ilya and Seola, suggesting that just one of them with a high-tier movement relic should tag along. But the moment he asks, Ilya and Seola suddenly look away, whistling and avoiding eye contact. Joo-hyun explodes in rage, screaming at them for abandoning him after making such a big deal about wanting to come. Julian joins in on the avoidance, waving his hand with a polite, fake smile as he tells them to have a safe trip and hurry along. Joo-hyun screams, calling them a bunch of absolute traitors. Up on the vine, the alternate majesty is already climbing with ease, dryly telling Joo-hyun to stop whining and start climbing, claiming it is not that bad once you get moving. Joo-hyun reluctantly grabs onto the massive green trunk, looking up and shouting in frustration, complaining that they aren't getting anywhere no matter how much they climb. The alternate ruler looks down, telling him to stop complaining and treat the endless vertical climb as a solid cardiorespiratory workout. Joo-hyun glares back, muttering that he is the only one who needs a workout here. Deciding he has had enough of manual labor, Joo-hyun calls out his trusty, glowing triple S rank heavenly rope. The rope wiggles happily, coiling around his waist. Joo-hyun smirks, commanding the relic to pull him straight up to the very top. With a powerful, effortless pull, the rope zips up the beanstalk, carrying a smug Joo-hyun past the hard-climbing alternate majesty. The alternate ruler watches him fly past, screaming that using a sentient rope to climb is absolute, unadulterated cheating. Joo-hyun laughs, yelling back that he is simply conserving his valuable stamina. Left behind in the dust, the alternate majesty clings to the vine, sweating and breathing heavily, grumbling that Joo-hyun could have at least offered him a ride. They finally reach the absolute peak under a massive, glowing full moon. The view is breathtaking, showing different world lines hanging like glowing ornaments in the cosmic branches of the beanstalk. Joo-hyun looks out over the vast, shimmering space, quietly asking if each and every one of those glowing branches represents a completely different world. The alternate ruler confirms it, gasping for air. Joo-hyun calls it fascinating, but immediately asks where the cowardly demonic rulebook went after handing out those perks. The alternate majesty points toward a glowing rainbow-colored gateway nestled between the upper branches, stating he will create a safe path right above the entrance. He channels his energy, creating a solid wooden bridge leading directly into the swirling vortex of the portal. Joo-hyun looks down at the glowing vortex, sweating slightly as he jokingly asks if they will have to crawl their way down a giant vine on the other side too. The alternate majesty smirks, taking a stylish leap directly into the swirling dimensional rift, confidently stating that won't be necessary. Joo-hyun follows close behind. Inside the portal, Jaeha's noodle cup soul is spinning wildly, coughing and sputtering through the dimensional turbulence. With a soft plop, the noodle cup lands on a purple-tiled floor. Jaeha looks around in a daze, wondering if he passed out after falling with the commander. He looks up and spots Joo-hyun and the alternate majesty standing nearby, completely frozen in shock. Jaeha looks up to see what they are staring at, and his jaw drops. They are standing in front of a massive, neon-lit cyberpunk skyscraper shaped like a giant cocktail glass, surrounded by glowing bars and palm trees. A glowing crimson systemic notification materializes, identifying this world line as Dionysus's Cup, with an ominous status indicator City of Madness in progress. Joo-hyun looks at the screen, noting the bizarre name. He looks down at the streets, seeing hordes of stylishly dressed citizens laughing and holding golden chalices. Jaeha's noodle cup floats beside Juhyun, questioning if the citizens are really as happy and peaceful as they look. Suddenly, a wild-eyed manic citizen runs past, raising his golden cup and screaming for everyone to drink, enjoy, and completely surrender their bodies to the relic. A thick, purple liquid flows through the open canals of the streets, emitting a heavy, sweet-smelling purple vapor into the air. Juhyun immediately covers his nose, coughing from the intense, suffocating smell of alcohol. Jaeha warns him that this vapor isn't just normal wine. A systemic warning confirms his fears, announcing that the purple vapor contains highly addictive and mind-altering substances. Looking closely at the dancing crowd, Juhyun realizes none of them are in their right minds. Their eyes are glassy, and their movements are completely feral. The alternate ruler explains that every majesty manages their world differently. Here, the ruler keeps the populace permanently intoxicated to completely paralyze their sanity. He explains that by turning the citizens into mindless, brainwashed addicts, the majesty can execute whatever twisted plans they want without any resistance. He points a finger toward the massive glowing neon skyscraper in the center of the city, stating that is where the local majesty and the rulebook are hiding. Juhyun starts walking forward, muttering that this place is incredibly creepy and they should end this quickly. But the alternate majesty suddenly grabs his arm, telling him to stop. The alternate ruler looks highly concerned, telling Juhyun to check his wrist immediately. Juhyun looks puzzled, wondering why his wrist matters. He pulls back his sleeve, his eyes widening in shock as a glowing digital blue number 50 appears directly on his skin like a glowing tattoo. Juhyun stares at his arm in absolute disbelief, his heart tightening as he mutters, demanding to know what this weird glowing countdown is supposed to mean. The alternate majesty grabs Juhyun's arm, repeating his warning to check his wrist immediately. Juhyun stares at the glowing, blocky blue 50 digital tattoo pulsing on his skin, his mind racing to understand the threat. He looks up at the alternate ruler, sweat dripping from his forehead as he demands a clear explanation for this bizarre number. The alternate majesty is completely horrified, screaming that a baseline of 50 is insanely dangerous, especially since they literally just arrived and haven't even done anything yet. He explains that the maximum default is 100, questioning how Juhyun even lives with such a terrible baseline. Juhyun snaps back, demanding he explain what the glowing red number on his other wrist means first. An interface graphic appears on screen. The blue gauge on the right wrist represents the sanity gauge. A higher number means you can maintain your free will, but the problem is that this gauge constantly drains just by breathing the air in this world. The red gauge on the left wrist is the madness gauge. In this twisted world, you need a high madness gauge to even activate relics, but higher madness rapidly drains your sanity, making balance crucial. Juhyun asks what happens if sanity hits 0, and the alternate ruler's face turns grim. He explains that you completely lose your free will, becoming a mindless puppet NPC controlled entirely by the local majesty. The alternate majesty quickly grabs Juhyun's other wrist, curious to see what his starting madness gauge is. But the moment his eyes lock on to the red numbers, the alternate ruler's face completely freezes in sheer unadulterated disbelief. Pulsing brightly on Juhyun's left wrist is a massive, terrifying red 99. The alternate majesty grabs Juhyun by his collar, screaming hysterically, asking what kind of absolute batshit crazy lunatic has a starting madness baseline of 99. Juhyun slaps his hand away, telling him to watch his mouth. A scale diagram appears. In this world, ordinary people have 0 madness. You need at least 30 to use basic relics, and reaching 70 makes you a high-rank user. The alternate ruler stares at Juhyun as if he is looking at a demon, noting that with a madness level of 99, Juhyun is practically a walking god-tier relic user. Juhyun just lets out a cocky smirk, stating that as long as he has no trouble activating relics, that is all that matters. He turns toward the giant neon glass tower, eager to find the local majesty. They blend into the neon-lit crowd, walking past glassy-eyed, drooling citizens who are staggering through the streets like zombies. Suddenly, a glowing purple notification box materializes in front of Juhyun's face, catching him off guard. The screen flashes a warning, announcing that his sanity gauge has just dropped by another 2 points. He looks down at his wrist as the number shifts. The alternate majesty dryly explains that the entire city is basically a living chalice. You get drunk and lose sanity just by breathing the air. Suddenly, the digital tattoo on Juhyun's wrist rapidly ticks down to 30. He panics, yelling, demanding to know why his sanity is draining 5 times faster than normal. Jaeha's noodle cup floats beside his head, laughing hysterically, teasing him that his sanity is dropping because he was already a complete psycho before they even got here. Ju Hyun's face contorts with rage. He grabs the noodle cup, furiously roaring that he is going to boil Jae-ha in pure alcohol as he drags the screaming cup toward a purple fountain. He holds the cup over the glowing purple geyser of wine, but as the strong, nauseating fumes hit his nose, he gags, coughing from the intense smell. He pulls back, but a loud beep echoes from his wrist. He looks down in horror, realizing his sanity has just plummeted to a critical 20. He throws his hand over his nose, coughing through the thick purple mist, stating they need to deal with this horrific alcohol smell immediately before they both turn into mindless NPCs. They look down at the streets where glowing streams of purple wine are flowing through open channels, keeping the entire populace in a state of absolute drooling stupor. Ju Hyun looks at the central fountain, realizing they need a powerful purifying relic to wash away the alcohol. He turns to the alternate Jae-ha, demanding he build something right now. The alternate Majesty looks exhausted, asking if Ju Hyun seriously wants him to create another high-tier relic, but he realizes that because relic creation is an innate Majesty power, he can still execute it despite his low madness. Ju Hyun rubs his chin, a devious grin returning to his face as he suggests they create a relic that will summon a massive purifying rain to completely dilute the city's waterways. An old scroll painting of a massive wooden ship floating on violent crashing waves appears. Ju Hyun suggests using the ancient biblical legend of Noah's Ark to summon the ultimate cleansing storm. The alternate ruler screams in pure frustration, asking why Ju Hyun is obsessed with forcing him to build complex religious relics. Ju Hyun casually tells him to just scale it down so it only rains over this specific city. The alternate Majesty sighs, drawing a golden magic circle on the concrete, asking if Ju Hyun actually knows the details of the story, explaining that a more detailed blueprint ensures a higher success rate. Ju Hyun proudly begins reciting the exact biblical verses, listing the cubits, the 40 days of rain, and the coordinates of the mountains of Ararat. The alternate Majesty sweat drops, completely dumbfounded by his photographic memory. The alternate ruler closes his eyes, channeling his magical energy into the golden circle, whispering that the creation is finally complete. A bright flash of golden light solidifies, revealing a standard folded black umbrella. Ju Hyun looks at it blankly, completely unimpressed. The alternate Majesty proudly opens the umbrella, showing off the small golden Noah's Ark logo printed on the fabric, claiming it will keep their clothes perfectly dry too. He raises the umbrella toward the dark sky. Instantly, massive heavy storm clouds begin to roll over the glowing neon towers. The alternate ruler looks back over his shoulder, his eyes serious as he tells Ju Hyun to get under the umbrella unless he wants to get absolutely soaked. A massive downpour of crystal-clear rain suddenly erupts over the city. A system window confirms the creation of the A-tier relic, Heavy Rain of Judgment. The heavy rain pours down, instantly purifying the toxic air. Within the rainy area, everyone's madness gauge is reduced by 20, while their sanity gauge is increased by 20. On the streets, a punk thug suddenly freezes, the purple glow fading from his eyes as he clutches his head, gasping in utter confusion. The citizens stagger around, groaning from sudden intense hangovers, realizing the purple wine in the canals has been completely diluted into plain water. Ju Hyun stands under the umbrella, laughing triumphantly, shouting for the rain to pour even harder and sober up these mindless puppets. But the sobered-up citizens are not happy. A massive, angry mob of half-sober thugs spots Ju Hyun holding the black umbrella. They scream in rage, pointing weapons, shouting that he is the one who stole their alcohol. A muscular thug lunges forward, swinging a heavy wooden club directly at Ju Hyun's head. Ju Hyun easily ducks, a wild, excited grin on his face. More angry thugs gather, brandishing hammers and baseball bats, growling that they won't let them get away with ruining their beautiful buzz. Ju Hyun is thrilled, calling for a classic brawl. He extends his hand, attempting to summon his legendary weapons to match their blades. But a flashing purple notification blocks his summon, declaring that due to a difference in Majesty status, he cannot summon relics from other dimensions in this territory. Ju Hyun's eyes widen in genuine surprise as a thug swings a sharp wooden spear, narrowly missing his throat as he ducks. Jae-ha's noodle cup bounces frantically, screaming in absolute panic, asking the commander what on earth he is going to do barehanded against an armed mob. Ju Hyun grumbles, looking at his empty hands, realizing the status barrier has completely locked down his personal vault, leaving him in a massive mess. A thug swings a heavy bat, mocking Ju Hyun for bluffing without a weapon, but Ju Hyun easily slides under the swing, disarming the thug with a brutal punch to the gut. Ju Hyun catches the heavy wooden bat in his hand, a terrifying manic grin spreading across his face as he mutters that he'll just have to settle for local procurement. With a sickening crack, Ju Hyun swings the bat, smashing it directly into a thug's face. He spins, delivering another brutal strike that shatters the bat against the thug's skull, sending him flying. Under the umbrella, the alternate majesty watches the absolute carnage, sweat dropping as he calls Ju-hyun an absolute unhinged lunatic. Suddenly, the glowing golden heavenly rope flies in, coiling around a heavy iron hammer that fell from a defeated thug, presenting it happily to its master. Ju-hyun is surprised to see the rope bypass the barrier. Just then, a group of high-ranking guards in sharp suits bursts onto the street, led by a captain brandishing a long traditional katana. The captain glares at Ju-hyun, drawing his blade as he demands to know who this outsider is. The katana flares with a massive roaring aura of crimson flames as the captain accuses Ju-hyun of being the culprit who erased their majesty's wine. The captain lunges with a flaming slash, but Ju-hyun simply slips past the blade, delivering a devastating punch directly into the captain's face. As the unconscious captain collapses, his flaming katana flies into the air. The heavenly rope whips upward, catching the blade with perfect timing. The remaining guards freeze, staring in absolute terror as their boss is knocked out cold in a single second. The bald guard screams in rage, warning Ju-hyun that a low-sanity outsider has absolutely zero chance of wielding such a high-tier cursed blade. But Ju-hyun just smiles, his blue eyes flashing with a terrifying light. Ju-hyun catches the katana. Instantly, a massive towering geyser of pure blood-red flaming energy erupts from the blade, lighting up the entire street. Jo-hyun takes a powerful stance, a manic, wide grin on his face as the crimson flames swirl around his body. The remaining guards fall backward, trembling in sheer terror as they stare up at the monstrous, overwhelming aura of the blade. Ju-hyun points the flaming sword directly at them, his eyes glowing in the dark, telling them they clearly have no idea what kind of monster they just handed this weapon to. He looks at the beautiful blood-red reflection of his face in the polished steel, letting out a satisfied laugh, stating that this blade brings back some incredible memories. With a dramatic flourish, he swings the flaming sword, the crimson fire lighting up his spiky black hair as the system identifies the legendary A-tier cursed katana, Muramasa's sword. Ju-hyun is officially ready for a bloodbath. He grips the hilt tightly, his eyes locking onto his targets with terrifying focus as he welcomes back the bloodthirsty blade. This isn't just any weapon, it's the legendary A-rank Muramasa's sword. A single casual swing unleashes a shockwave that slices clean through a solid building, leaving the remaining thugs trembling in their boots. He shrugs off the weapon's rank like it is pocket change, but admits the blade has a notoriously nasty temper. It takes a true madman to tame a cursed sword that literally feeds on the user's sanity. Fortunately, our captain has plenty of madness to spare. He drops into a low stance, stepping forward as his boots splash against the wet pavement. A flash of red light rips through the rain. Screams of agony echo through the alley as his blade cuts down the thugs with effortless, brutal precision. Under his umbrella, the alternate Jae-ha can only sweat in disbelief. He mutters that Ju-hyun's madness stat of 99 isn't just a stat, the captain is genuinely unhinged. Another thug is slammed ruthlessly against the stone floor, his defenses completely shattered. Surrounded by unconscious bodies, Ju-hyun stands completely relaxed, pointing the glowing sword at his final opponent. He casually reminds them that they aren't even in his league. He leans in with a terrifying manic grin stretching across his face, demanding they hand over every single relic they have. The defeated thugs grovel on the wet ground, shaking with fear as Ju-hyun warns them that hiding even a single trinket will cost them their heads. In a golden flash, they pile up their loot. The alternate Jae-ha looks at the random assortment of items, complaining that most of it looks like cheap, useless junk. Ju-hyun picks up a rustic wooden pipe. It is Pan's flute, an A-rank relic that can drive beasts and humans into a violent frenzy. But in a city where everyone is already crazy, its uses are questionable. Next is a shimmering silver feather lying on the ground, the legendary B-rank Icarus's feather. Ju-hyun smiles, thinking it will make a perfect mobility relic. But as a quick mythological reminder, Icarus is famous for flying too close to the sun and immediately plunging to his death. The alternate Jae-ha dryly points this out, questioning if this is really the best choice for air travel. Exasperated, the alternate Jae-ha suggests returning the junk to avoid making unnecessary enemies. But Ju-hyun just crouches down, playing with a small chain, telling him that true collectors appreciate the little things. His eyes catch a brilliant golden coin reflecting the neon lights. He picks it up, and the alternate Jae-ha's eyes widen behind his glasses. He recognizes it immediately as a high-stakes tool used by majesties from other world lines. He explains that other rulers use this coin to make unfathomable bets, literally wagering the survival of their entire worlds on a single toss. The coin delivers absolute triumph or complete ruin. Sensing the danger, the alternate Jae-ha urges him to throw it away before it triggers something catastrophic. Instead of throwing it away, Ju-hyun flashes a wicked, scheming grin. Jae-ha's heart sinks. He knows that look all too well. Ju-hyun bursts into wild laughter, holding the coin high. To him, This is the ultimate jackpot. Jae-ha can only scream in frustration. Before anyone can stop him, Joo-hyun flips the coin high into the air, casually calling tails. He catches it flat on his hand. The golden face stares back up at him. It is heads. He laughs it off, entirely unbothered by his bad luck. But just as Jae-ha begs him to stop being so reckless, a deafening explosion shakes the earth. Nothing says professional strategists like immediately losing a 50-50 bet and blowing up a building anyway. Billowing black smoke rises from the neon skyscraper district, lighting up the night sky in flames. System notifications flash. Dionysus's protective relic has been damaged, and a conquest battle for another majesty's territory has officially been triggered. Joo-hyun looks genuinely confused, claiming he didn't start any conquest. Jae-ha furiously snaps back that destroying city property is basically a declaration of war. In the distance, terrified citizens flee through the thick smoke. Jae-ha sighs, feeling pity for the innocent people caught in the crossfire. Jo-hyun gives him a cynical, side-eyed glance, asking if he is absolutely sure those people are innocent victims. Right on cue, a crazed mob of citizens armed with weapons charges straight at them, screaming to protect their sacred chalice and eliminate the intruders. Joo-hyun's eyes light up with manic excitement. He raises his sword, thrilled at the prospect of plundering their relics, while Jae-ha wonders how they always end up in these endless brawls. A surveillance camera feeds the chaotic battle directly to a monitor, showing Joo-hyun effortlessly cutting through the angry mob. Inside the central security control room, the captain watches in horror as their conquest gauge plummets, realizing they are dealing with an invading majesty. Panicking, the commander barks orders to mobilize their elite forces immediately to wipe out the target. A heavily armed riot squad marches into the rain, shields raised and batons ready to restore order. When they arrive, they're greeted by a bizarre sight. Crazed citizens are bound and hanging upside down from power lines like wet laundry. The squad surrounds Joo-hyun, demanding to know what kind of sick game he is playing with the locals. Joo-hyun casually glances back with a smug smirk, claiming he is just doing some simple dehydration. Beside them, Jae-ha stands under his umbrella next to the pile of wet, knocked-out citizens. Joo-hyun jokes that since everyone was completely soaked in alcohol, he did them a favor by washing and hanging them out to dry. Standard tactical clothesline drying. He shows off his wrist tattoo, proudly displaying his 99 madness, and jokingly asks if they are going to reward his hard work. The elite guard's sunglasses reflect Joo-hyun's infuriatingly smug grin, their anger reaching a boiling point. With a loud roar, the guards charge forward with their batons raised, ready to beat him into submission. Joo-hyun sighs at their lack of manners, bringing Pan's flute to his lips. It is time to play them a song. A haunting, eerie melody fills the air. Creepy red notes with glaring eyes swirl around the guards, driving them into a sudden, uncontrollable madness. Instantly, the guards lose all coordination, turning on one another in a brutal, chaotic fistfight. Joo-hyun watches the self-destructive spectacle with absolute amusement, laughing at how easily they fell for it. But as he turns to leave, a sharp silver blade slices through the air, barely missing his face. An elite female officer steps through the chaos, her gaze fixed entirely on him. She stands completely composed, her eyes cold. Joo-hyun's smirk returns. He is genuinely surprised someone managed to resist the flute's brainwashing. He looks down at her wrist. Her digital sanity gauge is glowing at a perfect rock-solid 100%. Jae-ha sweats, realizing the real powerhouse units have finally arrived, and notes that the flute has officially hit its limit. The officer advances with her tactical knife drawn. Joo-hyun admits his current low-tier relics might not be enough to break through her perfect mental defenses. She stares him down coldly, declaring him under arrest for inciting a riot in their city. Joo-hyun casually holds up the golden majesty coin, suggesting they settle this with a simple high-stakes game. The officer freezes, recognizing the legendary deathmatch coin used by dimensional rulers. She demands to know how a regular intruder got his hands on it. She quickly tries to calm herself, rationalizing that it must be a cheap, degraded replica that slipped through their confiscations. Refusing to fall for his tricks, she lunges forward, her blade cutting through the rain with lethal speed. Joo-hyun doesn't even flinch. He casually tosses the golden coin high into the night sky. The coin spins in slow motion above them, drawing everyone's anxious gaze. He catches it firmly in his fist, clamping his hands together with a sharp slap. Locking eyes with her, his face lit by a sinister glow, he smiles. Go ahead, make your choice. Heads or tails? His smug, unshakable grin tells her everything she needs to know. He has already set the trap. Sweat drips down her face under her mask. The pressure is suffocating, but she has to play. She nervously calls heads. Instantly, a violent purple shockwave detonates directly on her tactical glove, blowing her back. Ju-hyun bursts into laughter, celebrating his easy win. The officer stares at her hand in absolute disbelief, realizing the devastating power of a true hero-grade relic. She looks down at her wrist. Her perfect sanity gauge has just tanked down to 91. Ju-hyun mockingly points out that her precious sanity is already slipping. He casually suggests they go for another round. Her eyes widen in pure terror. She realizes this isn't a copy, this is a genuine soul-crushing deathmatch coin. Enveloped in a dark, fiery aura, Ju-hyun looks like a demon. A terrifying realization hits her. The man standing in front of her is a genuine majesty. He plays with the glittering coins, smiling as he claims his luck is on a roll tonight. He reminds her of the grim reality. She is all alone, and they have her completely cornered. Behind him, Jae-ha mutters that since he has no weapons, Ju-hyun is doing all the fighting, calling him a shameless liar who lies without blinking. Knowing she has no escape, the officer reluctantly steels herself to play his twisted game. She demands to flip the coin herself this time, reaching out her hand to take the gold coin. She tosses it high into the air, calling heads with everything on the line. It slaps down into her black glove. The gold profile of the goddess face is upside down. Tails. Another violent explosion rips through her defenses, sending shockwaves through the street. Ju-hyun casually cracks his neck, entirely unaffected, and demands the next round immediately. He tosses the coin up again with a flick of his thumb. Consecutive explosions burst all over her armor, shattering her physical and mental defenses. The entire Neon district seems to rumble as the high-stakes game continues at a brutal pace. She collapses to her knees on the hard pavement, completely exhausted. Ju-hyun looks down at her through the coin's dark reflection, telling her it's over. Panting heavily, her pride shattered, she desperately demands he flip it again, refusing to accept defeat. He looks at her with cold pity, asking if she can really afford another flip after looking at her wrist. She looks down. Her digital sanity tattoo has plummeted to a critical flashing single digit, 9. She gasps, unable to comprehend how she lost her mind so quickly. Ju-hyun folds his arms, explaining that while every round drains sanity, his extreme madness compatibility means he barely feels the toll. She glares at him, calling him a devious monster, finally realizing his entire plan was to drain her mind from the very start. His blue eyes turn sharp and threatening. He warns her that one more loss, and she'll be reduced to a brainless, obedient puppet. He sets the coin on his thumb, poised to make the final toss. Accepting her grim fate, she shuts her eyes as a tear escapes, waiting for her mind to be erased. But the final blast never comes. She opens her eyes, confused by his sudden hesitation. Ju-hyun lowers his hand, offering her a lifeline. He demands she hand over her relics and guide them safely to the local majesty. Grinning wickedly, he demands a secret route that completely bypasses their surveillance networks. Jae-ha can only watch in disbelief as Ju-hyun bends another opponent to his will. Under the full moon, the massive neon towers of the capital loom over the city, casting colorful searchlights into the night. The defeated officer leads them down a quiet, dimly lit alleyway. She stops abruptly, telling them they have to go on alone from here. Ju-hyun looks irritated by her sudden defiance. She points out the massive circular courtyard ahead, explaining that the entire area is under heavy surveillance. If she is spotted with them, she will be executed as a traitor. Ju-hyun doesn't care about her excuses. With a swift kick, he sends her flying right into the middle of the empty plaza. She stumbles and yells at him in a panic. But Ju-hyun just steps forward, looking around the deserted square, asking where all her supposed guards are. Jae-ha instantly senses something is off. Suddenly, the stone floor beneath their feet begins to glow with an ominous purple light. Massive, blinding pillars of purple energy shoot up from the circular patterns, trapping them in a light barrier. Nearby citizens stumble back in shock as the entire courtyard begins to tremble violently. With a deafening crack, the stone floor splits apart, collapsing inward like a giant sinkhole. They are all sucked into a bottomless, pitch-black abyss, falling helplessly into the dark. Ju-hyun grits his teeth, realizing they walk straight into a massive, premeditated trap. On the security monitors above, a targeting grid locks onto their falling silhouettes, confirming all targets have been neutralized. Inside the command center, the mustached general bursts into arrogant laughter, thrilled that their plan worked so flawlessly. A dark system warning appears. Once trapped inside the labyrinth, there is no escaping alive. The stone ceiling slams shut, sealing them in a subterranean prison choked with massive, thorny roots. Ju-hyun groans, rubbing his aching head as he sits up in the dark. Jae-ha rushes to his side, asking if he is all right. The elite officer screams in panic, cursing her own commanders for sacrificing her along with the intruders. Ju-hyun looks around, relieved to see everyone survive the fall. From the shadows of the cave, other trapped victims watch them, whispering in despair that they have been thrown into the legendary tomb. In the center of the massive, vine-draped chamber stands a stone pedestal glowing with a faint, purple light. This is the labyrinth, the end of the line. The other prisoners sob, claiming they are doomed to rot. Juhyun tells everyone to shut up and keep their heads straight so they can find a way out. Suddenly, Jae-ha freezes, his eyes wide. Heavy, dragging footsteps echo from the dark corridors. Juhyun immediately draws his glowing red Muramasa blade, his eyes narrowing as he prepares for a fight. Dirty, bare feet step slowly out of the shadows, dragging across the dusty stone floor. 3 ragged, hollow-eyed men step into the light. The middle-aged man with glasses sighs, pitying the newcomers who have been discarded down here. Juhyun demands to know who they are. The old man sadly explains they were trapped here long ago for refusing to submit to the local majesty. Another prisoner chimes in, explaining that anyone who keeps their sanity score above 70 is deemed a threat by the government and thrown down here to die. Juhyun looks up at a flickering lantern, realizing the truth. The city's madness wasn't just a byproduct of toxic alcohol, the regime is systematically locking up everyone who has free will. Juhyun tells them to stop crying and follow him, promising to break them all out. But the old man just scoffs, saying it is completely impossible. He points to a massive iron vault door strangled by thick, thorny vines. That door is their only way out. Nestled within the vines are golden chalices filled with a glowing, bubbling purple wine. The old man warns that to open the door, they must drink the wine, but it is a poisoned chalice that strips away your free will, turning you into a mindless slave instantly. Juhyun stands tall before the glowing chalice, completely unfazed. The old man sighs, presenting their ultimate cruel choice: starve to death in the dark or drink the wine and leave as a mindless puppet. But knowing Juhyun, a rigged choice is just another rule he is about to break. Beside them, another captive mutters in quiet desperation, but Juhyun has already made up his mind. He has no intention of rotting in this place. He draws the red, glowing Muramasa blade. If there is no key to open this gate, he will gladly slice right through it. Juhyun leaps forward with a wicked grin, swinging the burning blade, glad he picked up a weapon that thrives on raw destruction. As the crimson steel approaches, a glowing red skull flashes across the iron gate, triggering an automatic security scan. The system begins scanning his mind, measuring his mental strength and his level of madness. With a mechanical chime, the scanner registers the conditions as satisfied, and the massive stone doors slowly begin to rumble open. Juhyun lands back on his feet, looking slightly surprised that his little stunt actually worked so easily. Behind him, the prisoners and Jae-ha watch in absolute shock as the unbreakable gateway opens up on its own. The captives can't believe their eyes, realizing that only someone with a completely broken, chaotic mind could satisfy those extreme security conditions. They stare in absolute horror at his wrist, where his digital tattoo is glowing with an impossible madness level of 99. The old man stammers in disbelief, explaining that having that much madness should normally reduce someone's sanity to 0, turning them into a mindless beast. Juhyun just shrugs it off with a smirk, joking that maybe foreigners are built different, and signals everyone to hurry up and follow him. Meanwhile, a heavy fist slams down onto a metal desk with a deafening bang. Inside the security control room, the mustache commander screams at his operators, demanding to know how a locked prison gate could just open. A panicked technician points to the monitors, explaining that the intruder's madness level is so absurdly high that the gate automatically assumed he was a brain-dead, harmless host. Yes, Juhyun literally bypassed high security locks by being too unhinged for the system to care. The commander grinds his teeth, sweating. He growls that the guy is a complete freak of nature, since keeping your sanity intact at madness level 99 is physically impossible. Fearing their escape, the commander snaps and orders his men to activate every single trap in the facility. He commands them to awaken their secret weapon, the second heart, and unleash it straight into the path of the fleeing prisoners. As the group rushes down the dark corridor, writhing black shadows begin to slither across the stone walls behind them. Sensing the danger, Juhyun spins around instantly, cutting through the shadows with a swift double slash of his burning katana. Massive green tentacles are severed, spraying thick, glowing purple slime everywhere as Juhyun mutters about how annoying these traps are. The chopped vines melt into a highly corrosive pool of acid on the stone floor, filling the tight corridor with a putrid, choking stench. A flashing system alert warns him that his sanity has dropped by 5 points just from breathing in the toxic fumes. The parallel Jae-ha warns him to sheath his sword, realizing that cutting these things only releases more sanity-draining gas into the air. With a frustrated shout, Juhyun sheathes the blade and starts brutally swatting the incoming vines away using his scabbard instead. Suddenly, a heavy rhythmic thud echoes from the darkness, making him freeze. The terrifying thuds grow louder, rattling the stone walls as the prisoners look down the pitch-black tunnel, shaking with fear. The hallway ahead is lined with severed vines and pools of purple fluid, and whatever is marching toward them doesn't sound friendly. Leaping down from the shadows is a towering, gray-skinned beastman with curved horns and a manic grin. This is Satyros, the labyrinth guardian. In Greek myth, satyrs were wild, horned woodland companions of Dionysus, famous for their physical desires, chaotic behavior, and massive tolerance for alcohol. The monster's glowing yellow eyes lock onto Juhyun, highly amused to find a human walking through his maze with his sanity still intact. With a deafening roar, Satyros unleashes a wave of mental pressure, forcing Juhyun to clutch his head in sharp pain. Another system warning pops up. Their sanity is dropping rapidly, just by being in the Guardian's presence. Satyros commands his smaller beast minions to bring out giant wine casks, declaring it is time to teach these cocky humans a lesson, while his vines wrap tightly around the elite female officer. With a cruel splash, her head is dunked straight into the bubbling purple vat of mind-erasing wine. The minor demons cackle with glee as they prepare to force the rest of the helpless prisoners to drink the toxic liquor. The officer splutters and coughs, desperately trying to spit the liquid out, but she can already feel her mind beginning to slip away. Enraged by the torture, Juhyun flashes forward, his blade leaving bright trails of red light as he brutally slices through the minor demons. He stands calmly over the pile of defeated monsters, sighing as he admits he really didn't want to resort to his next play. Satyros crosses his arms and chuckles, asking why a human with such high madness is wasting his time trying to protect these weaklings. The beast mockingly asks if he is trying to play hero and rule over these pathetic cattle. Juhyun gives him a freezing glare, resting his sword on his shoulder, and coolly tells the monster to watch its mouth because he is already a king. He points the tip of his sword at the giant beast, suggesting they settle this dispute like rulers. Juhyun reaches into his pocket and holds up the glittering gold majesty coin, knowing that kings love to settle things with high-stakes wagers. He proposes a classy game of coin toss, secretly planning to use the gamble to buy his team some valuable time. Satyros lets out a wide, toothy grin, finding the human's boldness incredibly amusing. However, the massive beast steps forward, towering over him, and states that he will be the one choosing the game. He points to a small stone table in an alcove, declaring that since they are in Dionysus's domain, the wager must be a drinking game. 6 golden chalices of glowing purple wine are placed on the table, and Satyros reveals that exactly one of them contains a deadly sanity-erasing poison. Holding up his clawed fingers, the monster explains they will play 3 rounds, selecting 2 cups per round. The prisoners and Jae-ha watch anxiously from the sidelines as the beast explains the rules. You drink 1 cup yourself and give the other to your opponent. Juhyun eyes the cups, confirming that both of them will be risking their lives with every single turn. The captives cry out in panic, shouting that the game is completely unfair since the monster prepared the drinks and clearly knows which cup is poisoned. Satyros roars in anger, scaring the prisoners backward, yelling that he takes his games and his alcohol far too seriously to cheat. Juhyun tells his team to relax. Without a hint of hesitation, he reaches out and picks up one of the heavy gold chalices. Satyros looks slightly surprised, raising an eyebrow at how quickly and confidently the human made his move. The parallel Jae-ha screams in absolute panic, begging him to stop and think before drinking a mysterious liquid. But Juhyun completely ignores him, tilting his head back and chugging the entire glowing drink down in one giant gulp. Satyros watches with a tense, greedy grin, waiting to see if the human's eyes glaze over from the poison. Juhyun slams the empty golden cup onto the table, wiping his chin with a grin, casually noting that the vintage isn't half bad. Satyros chuckles, admitting that luck was on his side for the first turn, as he moves to hand over the next cup. But before the beast can even react, Juhyun grabs the next full chalice and immediately starts chugging that one too. The parallel Jae-ha's jaw drops in horror as his noodle cup form shakes. He screams that Juhyun was supposed to hand that second cup to the monster, realizing the captain just willingly drank the poison cup out of sheer impatience. With a drop of purple wine dripping from his mouth, his blue eyes flashing with a cold, smug light, Juhyun just grins. He tells his panicked team to sit tight and keep watching, because he is just getting started.